Welcome to the podcast that's dedicated to making you a faster cyclist, the Ask a Cycling Coach podcast presented by TrainerRoad. This is episode 287. We're going to answer more of your cycling and triathlon related questions today that you've submitted at trainerroad.com/podcast with the original crew. We have TrainerRoad and Cannondale's Amber Pierce.
Good morning, everybody.
We have our head coach, Chad Timmerman.
Hi, everyone.
And our CEO, Nate Pearson.
Hello.
Chad, how's the ankle? Can we start off with that?
Yeah, it's improving for sure. It's not bleeding anymore, but it's still swollen. Going for my first session of physical therapy today. I have 5 weeks basically to show that I can rehab it to a point where I don't require surgery. So I go back for a recheck in 4 weeks. And at that time, they'll decide whether or not surgery is necessary.
Can you ride?
Yeah, I can. I can't really press, and getting out of the saddle is a little tenuous, so I try not to. But my butt gets pretty sore, especially when you're riding at low resistance. But yeah, at least I'm on the bike.
This is going to cut into your ski season too, Chad.
I know. I'm just banking on the fact that ski boots are super supportive. So I just need to get to a point.
They're like a cast.
Never mind
right?
getting in and out of them.
They are a cast. I should just put one of those on. I didn't even need to buy a boot.
It's a good point, right? So like I mentioned, you can submit questions at trainerroad.com/podcast. Thanks for doing that, by the way. We get so many of them. We have a great selection this week. We're going to talk about crank length, go into a deep dive in that of sorts. We're going to talk about DOMS and muscle growth and how they relate to each other, healthy snacks, tons of other stuff. So it'll be a good episode. But first things first, the Successful Athletes podcast. You should all be listening to that if you're listening to this one. And down below in the description, you can find a link to the Successful Athletes podcast, whether you're joining us live on YouTube right now or through any sort of podcast medium that you're using. And you should subscribe to that because it's awesome. This week, we had Doug Moore. So I'm going to run these things off. 5 kids. He has a full-time job as a product manager. In addition to that, he's also heading up some sort of like a very high demand side project that he's working on. In addition to that, they live on a farm, so he has to take care of the farm. He does all those things, and he does a low volume training plan because that's all he can fit in. Yet he still was able to put together a 3-day ride from north to south across the whole state of Utah and just jam it the whole way. And the training prepared him very well for that low volume training. So perfectly representing that same thing we talk about all the time, right, Nate? About how you don't, just like you at Leadville, how you don't have to do 8-hour days to be able to do an 8-hour day, right? So
yeah, that would be horrible if you had to do that. Like, do an Ironman before you do an Ironman, just like multiple Ironmans to prep for the Ironman.
Oh, it'd be terrible, right? And then next week we actually have Jamie Berry. He's from the UK and he's a young athlete who drove himself completely into very dangerous territory with REDS. So we're going to talk in that episode all about how he recognized that, how he treated it, but then how he used TrainerRoad to rebound from that. He's healthier. He is faster than he's ever been. And he's also training less than he was. He's eating better. It's all things good. So tons of learnings from that one. And I really want to thank Jamie for sharing his experience with us. So check out that episode. It'll be coming up next Monday. Once again, you can subscribe down at the link below. And then Nate, also, you had something on your Instagram and Instagram Live. We don't know the exact name of this yet. It's tr.nate. There's the plug. But you did a business podcast, actually, a discussion with the founder of Spec, which they make the phone cases that a lot of us have probably had. And it's super good conversation, but you have you're working on another guest, as I understand it.
Yes, we have another one Monday. So I don't want to promise anything, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to keep doing it if people like it. But it's going to be live Monday Pacific at 8 a.m. Pacific time. And I didn't do the math ahead of time to figure out what time that is on other places than like LA, but that's the time it is. And this guest, her name is Fazia Malik, and she's from Tanzania. And she actually has 3 businesses, which is really cool. One, she sells bottled water, which you think that doesn't sound like very cool, but if you can compete against like Coca-Cola and like the big, huge ones, it's a big deal. 2, she sells diapers, which is cool. She's a mom and she didn't like the way the diapers were, so she did her own brand of diapers. And then just yesterday I saw she launched like a fitness apparel, women's fitness apparel, kind of like, I don't want to say like Lululemon, but it looks really cool. And I really want to find out, how does one go from like, just like, hey, I'm just going to launch an apparel line and then it comes out, right? Like, I want to do that. So that'd be really cool. So anyways, we're going to talk about it. I'm going to post on Instagram to pre-ask questions for her, and then we discuss. So it's one thing is it's not an interview, it's a discussion about all things business. And yeah, it's going to be super cool. And I also want to make this show very international and all different types of industries. So I got some other people, one person in food, another person in like marketing consulting and products and software, all these different sorts of people lined up. It'll be very awesome. And then the last thing is, I know it's hard to watch it on Instagram Live or on my Instagram. After we do 3, if I'm still feeling it and digging it, we'll create a podcast and get it so people can listen to it and, you know, all the things.
Cool. Awesome. So that's tr.nate on Instagram. You can find us all on Instagram too. And I recommend doing it. If you're joining us on YouTube, you can see it here, but Amber Malika. Yeah. No, he's on there.
He doesn't use it.
Coach Chad TR, Amber Malika, and myself, Lee Jonathan _. So give us a follow there. Come hang out. It'll be good times. And of course, follow TrainerRoad if you're not doing it. Seriously, we have so much. Like if you look at brands that put out useful, helpful content instead of just like shameless self-promotion, all we do is put out like useful, helpful content, and so much of it. We have incredible copywriters, designers, everything else that are always putting really cool things together. So check that out. It's a good way to get faster while you're just scrolling through your social feed, because we all know our addiction to that exists. So before we jump into that too, Damon has something that I wanted to read. So Damon is actually the person that submitted a question asking about how to train when you don't have access to a power meter and that sort of stuff. We talked about alternatives, and this one just warmed my heart. So Damon said, not a question, just an update. After you guys answered my question about training without a power meter a couple of weeks ago, a very kind Samaritan sent me a Cyclops magneto trainer and a speed cadence sensor. I got everything set up and signed up for an account and am now training with virtual power. Tomorrow is my 3rd workout and I'm already loving it. So he says, I just want to say how much I appreciate the TrainerRoad app. I initially tested out a competitor before signing up for TrainerRoad, and it was immediately apparent upon logging in for the first time that your user interface alone is well worth a few extra dollars. You can really tell how much more time and care the TR team puts into making this app the best it can be. Super awesome. So that's really cool. And then we have another athlete who wants to get you a heart rate monitor as well, Damon. So I'll be connecting you there, which would be really cool. And then we've also, and I haven't heard any follow-up on this, but we also had a number of athletes who reached out that were interested in acting as the captain for the Stoker, who was the blind athlete looking to possibly even chase Olympic dreams about doing that, which was really cool. So if I connected you and that worked out, please let me know. If I didn't connect you, or if you did want to do that, we can connect him with even more options. So that's not bad. So if there are more athletes that want to do this, let me know.
How does that work?
So
Like,
cool.
Does that person pedal?
It's a good question. I'm not sure actually in this case. Yeah, it's a good question.
Because if they do, you should contact Brendan Wirtz. I just talked to him yesterday. His FTP is 477. Like, I don't know if you even have to pedal. You just sit there behind him. It'll be amazing. But that's who you want to like find him on Instagram and be like, hey, you want to go to the Olympics? And he'll say yes.
There you go.
I believe that he's even been at that level of competition at the Junior Olympics, perhaps with rowing before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, Brendan, the guy we're talking about, he's a Mike's Bikes rider. And if you go to our race analysis YouTube page, you can see when I lost a sprint at a very foolish move, because I was sticking behind Brendan because I thought there's no way anybody will beat this man because he is so strong. But you can see him actually riding in a road race and also in a criterium there. I talked to him in the middle of the road race and he had a whole Cat 3 field attacking him nonstop, the entire field. And I asked him at one point, are you bored? And he was like, yeah, I kind of am. Not bragging or anything. He just kind of was bored. I feel for the man. He has too big of an FTP. So such is life.
Must be rough.
I know, right? Let's get into I know. So this one, I'm gonna paraphrase. So Dimitri, basically, this next question, he posed like an interesting discussion point, right? And this discussion point, I think, has a few really good spots that we can kind of focus on and hone in. I'm not going to read his whole question or his whole point, and I don't think he meant it like that. So I'm just going to pick and choose from this one. But I'll start off with this. He says, I believe it would be great and appropriate for the time of year when many of us are in the off-season or base season to do a longer discussion on the concept below. You guys have touched on it from many, many sides in previous podcasts, but I don't remember you truly committing to it and spelling it out for listeners crystal clear. The topic is simple. You will become a better rider if you cultivate many different skills. And you've stated that before. So, and actually, Amber, you've mentioned this that recently and how you've been working on mountain biking, and you went from swimming to cycling. And Nate, you talk about the skill development that you've always had. Chad, we have talked about this. He says, the problem I see is that although this sounds good in theory, I personally shied away from that because of a simple fact. Mastering a skill is difficult, and it seems and sometimes is out of grasp. So how can I ever carve a rad turn on the mountain bike like Jonathan, descend on the road bike like Amber, strength train like Chad, nail volume like Nate, have Pete's racecraft, and on it goes. The task is to Nate's face right now, if you could only see or hear
nail
it.
Volume. Have you paid attention? I can, when I'm pretty good, I'm like a domestic pro at reaching the top shelf in the kitchen. Like that's pretty good. But other than that, I'm not, I don't do any of it well. Sorry. Okay, continue. Sorry, I interrupted.
You are consistent though. And except for when you do
too much volume.
I know that. Yes, that's what I was going to say. Too much volume.
The thing he says I do well, except when I do that bad.
Yeah, exactly. He says the task is too formidable on each point, and so I don't start any of them. Ooh, this is that's a really good point. So, a lot of us probably do that. So this is where we'll kind of drop off. He says, the point I see meriting to be stressed is this one. You don't need to cultivate Instagram worthy skills to get better, and you can get a base level of competency in these areas that will benefit your cycling greatly. He says, in fact, if you try, and this is perhaps the first discussion point here. He says, in fact, if you try to be competent in as many areas as possible and excel in just a few, you'll be the best rider you can be given your time constraints. Okay. So I just want to have like a larger discussion on this whole point of developing skills, being intimidated by mastery of a skill, or how to achieve that and how to go about the whole thing. Nate, it's interesting. Like, I want to start with you on this just because you were mentioning like business people, right? So somebody that goes from water to diapers to clothes to all these things. I'm sure you've come across people that just seem like they have everything in terms of like tens across the board on skill sets or something like that. Like they're very skilled.
No, I know, but I've seen behind the curtains. It's not. It's just this is great. So what it is, so I hang out with a whole bunch of business people through Entrepreneurs Organization, and there are a few, like I call geniuses, but they're very few and far between. Like 1 out of 500 will be that way. And I'm just like, wow, this person is amazingly smart. Everyone else, at least they present to everyone else. Like I have this too, unearned confidence. We're just like, we can do it. There's like, no, why not? Like, let's just go do it. And then the other part of that, a lot of times these people even have imposter syndrome. That's also, I would say probably 70% of the people that you see have imposter syndrome, which means they feel like they don't belong, but everyone else feels like they don't belong too. And it's very funny, right? And what they just do is they don't care. They're not super scared about failing or super scared about people seeing them do bad things, like getting judged by other people. And that's so key in probably everything in life, right? I share on this. I'm horrible at tons of things. I don't really care if people know about it because it's like a learning opportunity. And if you have that growth mindset, you can be successful in business or cycling. But if you're scared that like, you know what, I'm never going to be great. This is too hard. And that's another thing too, is when you start these things, you get all excited about any kind of skill or business. And then you get a little bit in, you're like, ooh, this is kind of hard. And then you get in this part where like, wow, this is going to take so much time and effort, right? This is kind of like, this happens with cyclists. You start and you're like, oh, this is kind of fun. Then you ride with some people, this is hard. Then you ride with really fast people and you're like, I'm never, ever, ever going to get there. But if you can get past it and start getting those habits in and that learning and growth, you can come to the other side where you're like, hey, this isn't so bad anymore. I remember like 3 hours a week used to be insanely hard for me to do. Like I dread getting on the bike. And now I'm like, it's fun every time, right? And I know what I'm doing and I can see the path to the future and I can understand what I'm doing, how that impacts the future.
Yeah,
I didn't really answer your question, but that's something I want to talk about.
Yeah, and let's pivot to Amber on this because Amber, you went from swimming to cycling, and we've talked about the fact that yes, you did start out in lower categories and worked your way up, but that was very quick. Like relatively speaking, you ended up amongst pros very quickly. Were you intimidated by that? Like, did you paint in your mind that everybody else were pro riders and you were just fresh and new and uniquely disadvantaged, or perhaps that they were uniquely advantaged?
I wouldn't say I was intimidated. And actually, in my case, and this is maybe a little bit unique because I happened to be physically in a geographic location where there were some really high level cyclists all around me who were also very approachable, kind people who were very eager to help share lessons and help me learn, which was really great. So I think that made the whole process feel more approachable. And it was so fun because I think as you start, the gains that you make on any skill are huge. And then what happens is the longer you hone a particular craft or a particular skill, the smaller those gains become. And that can be kind of hard. So it's actually kind of fun in the beginning, I think, because you do make so much progress so quickly. And then I think there's kind of this pattern, which I certainly saw with cycling, where in the beginning I was improving really quickly. I was on this really steep learning curve and it was awesome. And then you feel like you're having some success and that really helps feed the motivation, feed the confidence. And then I went to Europe and it was like, oh, so this is the deep end. And at first that was really intimidating because it was kind of like, oh, wait a minute. Like I am really going to I have a long way to go. I have a much longer way to go than I thought I did. And at first that was intimidating, but eventually that became a source of comfort because what I then realized was this never ends in a good way, because I'm never going to cross some invisible finish line where like, that's it. You have learned the skills. Congratulations. Like, no, I can actually get better at any one of these things forever. I really can. I can always learn something about how I can become better. And what I found was, yes, it's fun to be good at something, but it's even more fun to be in the process of becoming better. And that process never has to end. And that's pretty cool. And I think that that's a hard thing to wrap your head around in the very beginning. But as you go through that process and you gain perspective, that actually becomes something kind of cool because it's like, wow, let's just imagine all of the things I don't know yet. And it's so exciting because it's all of the stuff that's there for you yet to explore.
John, you know Richie Rude, who I say is totally world-class, right, for skills on the bike, for mountain biking. You might not know this, but I wonder if he ever has a run and goes, wow, I suck. Like,
he does.
I didn't do a good, right? And then looks at it, analyzes it, and tries to improve an extra % or two on time the whole time. He doesn't just say, I'm good for Instagram now, let's go do it. And it just coasts and goes, check mark, I'm done.
Yeah. He actually, and he's mentioned that this year he had trouble getting the results that he wanted to get. And he was super analytical about how he broke it down. And now he has learnings and a new challenge and something to work on. And so it's never that, like, I do believe that mastery is misunderstood in the sense that a lot of people assume that it's a spot where you've achieved a certain level and then not that you rest on your laurels, but improvement just doesn't happen. However, if anything, actually improvement is probably happening faster or more often at that level, because to get to a point of mastery, whatever you deem that is, that requires a person to really adopt actively a growth mindset and constantly they're in the habit of finding ways to improve all the time, right? Whereas an athlete that really isn't there, they're not doing that sort of thing. And something that I want to discuss here too is that he mentioned that an athlete that has or that you'd be a better athlete if you tried to just focus on a bunch of different things. And I guess that's probably depends on the discipline, right? Because for time trialing, it does not matter how good your bunny hop is, no matter what, right? That just doesn't matter. But Chad, this jack of all trades sort of a thing, it actually doesn't pan out quite as often as we think, right?
Yeah. And I come up against this personally, and I see people come up against it because it's a tempting, alluring thing to be good at so many things. But the fact is, if you chase too many things, you're never going to be very good at any one of those things. So that's that whole jack of all trades, master of none sort of ideology. And I think it works well in the context of just being a good human being, just being capable in many respects. And I won't say it's easy to achieve, but that's not hard to achieve relative to becoming really good in a lot of athletic realms. Because at some point you have to get specific. You have to say, even though I want to be good at 10 things, I'm going to pick the 5 things that are most relevant to that one thing that I really want to be good at, or those 2 things that overlap closely enough that I can chase both of them. But at some point, you've got to whittle it down. Otherwise, and this is going to sound like I'm harping on CrossFitters, but actually Nate is the one who brought this up, and he said it a number of times, and I've agreed with him every time. Is that CrossFitters claim that they're the fittest athletes in the world. And I hate it. It gets under my skin every time I hear it, because they're not. They're the fittest CrossFitters in the world. They're good at a wide array of things, and that's true, but they're not the fittest athletes in the world. I mean, you take the best CrossFitter, I think a couple of years ago in the CrossFit Games, and this is the peak of the peak, right? They had a criterium, and they put these muscle-bound, very capable human beings in a lot of realms on bicycles and had them race around. And this is a foreign experience for them, so I cut them a heck of a lot of slack, but even the best amongst them probably couldn't hold his or her own in a Cat 3 criterium. They're just not going to, and that's far from the high end of things. I mean, there's so many steps above Cat 3. Well, go ahead.
Think about them racing a marathon against Kipchoge, right?
Just on the fittest in the world. But actually racing a marathon, just getting under 3 hours when you're carting around an extra 30 pounds of lean mass. I mean, that lean mass is super useful in a lot of contexts. But when it comes to, we're endurance athletes. So we think in endurance athlete terms. You're never going to be a good endurance athlete if you have 10, 20, 30 extra pounds of muscle mass dragging you down.
They're good at a lot of things.
A lot. It's impressive.
And
it's always impressive.
Better than the normal person at a lot of things, but not as good as a specialist in anything. There's no thing where like someone specializes in, let's say, weightlifting, and they're going to clean more than someone who goes to the Olympics and cleans, right? Like it's just not going to happen. This is one thing you said, Chad, about having to specialize. I think it all depends on your goals, because you can be like, you just want to ride with your friends for fun. I want to mountain bike some. I'm going to do some cross. And you can even race, right? And I'm going to do some gravel rides, and then I'm going to try a triathlon. And you can be pretty good at all of that, but it's without specialization, it's extremely hard to win a national championship unless you have, like a crazy VO2 max. And there are people that do that can just like hop between sports, and their fitness makes up for their skill.
And that's true too. But if you take somebody who's Cat 4 fit and they want to progress to Cat 3, they're going to have to get a little more specific. And then if they want to make the broader leap to Cat 1, 2, they're going to have to get more specific in all the things they pursue. So without becoming a total specialist and not pursuing domestic professionalism or, world tour ranks, they're going to have to get more and more specific. And typically this process handles itself, right? You start doing things and you get good at one thing, and then you recognize the things that are necessary to support that, to prop it up. And it happens on its own. And before you know it, you've kind of shed those superfluous things that you didn't really need anyway. Even though you'd like to be good at them, they're not necessary to be good at the things you enjoy doing most.
This is why, forgive me, this is why athletes like Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, Mathieu van der Poel, Wout van Aert, like these athletes are so impressive because they're able to perform at the top level. And I know it's all cycling, but they are very unique disciplines. And I think it even shows, like with Mathieu van der Poel with cross-country mountain biking. I know that we still feel like he just showed up and dominated, but if you look back, there were 2 seasons of bumping his head against the wall, really trying to figure it out and why he was not performing at the level he should have. It wasn't because he wasn't fast. It wasn't because he wasn't fit. He was, but he had to really learn that next level of execution. And we've actually talked about this with Get Ready to Drink with Keegan a few times, where he's talked about the World Cups. And we know that he can execute and get a really good, like by the numbers, he should be able to finish really well in a World Cup, but he's just figuring it out. Like there's this other level when you enter with the world's most elite that's really complex. And it's tough to figure out. So that's why it's so impressive to see an athlete like Pauline that's just able to excel at so many different disciplines. But with all that said, it's really tempting to make that or their expertise or the expertise of somebody else and how much work it took to get there to act as a big discouragement to us. Like basically to say, well, then why should I even try? Because I'll never get to that level. And it's that whole thing of letting good be the enemy of great. Like you basically get to a point where you're like, well, if I can't be perfect, I'm just not even going to try. And it's exactly, and it happens all the time, right, Nate? Like
all the time, everyone, everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Very
Amber, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you bring up a couple of really good points with that. So looking at riders like Pauline Ferrand-Prévot, one of the things I think that makes that type of breadth possible is a lot of times when you work on one skill, it will relate to other skills, right? So as an example, if you get really, really good at cornering your bike, you will not only be better in a criterium, but you will also be better at descending, because going downhill, the only thing that's really tricky about going downhill is going around corners downhill, right? Like if you're just going straight, it's not really that big of a deal. So working on the cornering skill actually translates to a lot of different related skills, right?
Nate's smiling once again.
You're just saying these things that aren't true. Like going downhill, a straight line at 60 miles per hour is insanely scary. And I'd rather go 30 miles per hour on tight corners. Like, ugh. But that's just me. So there's an example. You can suck at everything, people, and it's okay. It's about enjoying the process of improving, right? Like if you enjoy the process of improving, you can be successful in it. You're never no one masters anything. Like the best chess player in the world is still like, oh, I'm so bad, right? Don't worry about it. Just improve, and don't worry about, especially it's an Instagram image. Well, don't look at that at all.
Yeah.
That is also the worst.
Don't try to emulate that level of what you see. People are putting out the absolute best from the best angle, from the best circumstances at all times. You're looking at something that is not representative of real life. You know, and so when we hold ourselves to that standard, we really do ourselves a disservice. Sorry, Amber, we interrupted.
No, not at all. Yeah, I agree. When you're looking at Instagram, nobody's behind the scenes can compare to someone else's highlight reel ever. It's just not possible. But one of the things I wanted to bring up too is that in addition to my previous point, hang on a second, I just lost my train of thought. Sorry,
okay, I'll say something. Google Instagram versus reality. I don't know if it's a Instagram feed, but I know it's on Reddit, and it shows like the beautiful people on Instagram, and then there's pictures or videos of them when they're not like completely edited, and they do not look. It's not the same person, and it's one of those things where the Instagram life is a lie, right?
Yeah,
it's not.
Totally.
It's not true.
Yeah,
I remembered what I was going to say. Sorry.
Cool.
Go ahead, Jonathan.
Please, no, go.
Okay. One of the things I want to point out is when it comes to bike handling skills in particular, you do not have to achieve mastery to be a good bike handler, right? So I want to just put that out there as well. It's not like you don't have to have Instagram worthy skills in order to handle a bike well, in order to race, in order to do these things. So it's just about jumping on that learning curve and engaging with it. Because if you learn how to corner well, if you feel more confident on your bike, those skills, you can always build those skills more, but every time you improve those, you're going to improve your confidence, and all of that is going to help. So don't feel like you have to achieve mastery in order to do anything really. It's just about getting on that learning curve wherever you are, engaging with it, and starting to move along it.
Yeah, and then there's the other. Oh, sorry, Nate, please.
I want to talk about you, John. John,
Yeah.
you are so John's a great example of this. His goal is a U.S. National Cross Country Mountain Bike Championship, and John has extremely high mountain bike skills, but he's not as good as Keegan. He's not as good as Richie Rude. But looking at his goal and the kind of courses for cross country, we've talked about it. John could probably get as good as Keegan or Richie and not take many seconds off at all. Keegan, Amber. She's drinking every time I say it.
I'm running out of coffee.
You're not going to be able to. It's not coffee.
Another
Chad,
cup of
we
tea.
know it.
That's bourbon.
But John, like you might take maybe a couple seconds off because the course, your descending skills aren't limited by the terrain. But what John does need to specialize in more is he needs to get his power to weight ratio up even higher. And that's the thing where you probably have the most room, the least amount, or the most, for the time in, you can improve the most. For you to increase your skills that much to get to like a Richie Rude level, you'd have to do some crazy, crazy training.
And it would come with a lot of risk that I'm not willing to tolerate either, you know?
Exactly. So just like you don't have to be a master too to even perform at a very high level, which is what Amber is saying. I don't need to take a turn at 60 miles per hour on my road bike in order to do well in a crit. I need to take them at like 25, maybe sometimes 30. And then I'm fine. Like, right. I'll be okay in a crit.
And it's also, there's a danger with this too, is that sometimes we tend to like almost like vilify mastery or set it as something that's just like, well, it'll never be achieved. So I'm just absolutely not concerned with it. But really, instead, what we should do is if we're going to point at something and say something's bad, it should be our unrealistic goal settings as it relates to that, rather than, mastering the skill itself. So like a good example of this, maybe this will make a bit more sense, but cyclocross racers and hopping barriers. Some cyclocross racers refuse to do it, and they start to hate barriers, and they start to hate the concept of bunny hopping over barriers. And whenever somebody brings it up, they're like, yeah, well, you can run faster. You know what I mean? Like you can get through it. It's not always the fastest. And really what happens is the skill, because it isn't attainable, and because we've probably set some sort of unrealistic expectations that we should just be able to do it without working at it. Or why do I have problems with it if it seems like nobody else has problems with it? Once again, not understanding all the work that goes in behind the scenes. But many times we begin to almost like hate the skill or hate the level of accomplishment of the skill in and of itself. Now, if it has nothing to do with what your performance is going to need on race day, like what's required of you, then yeah, it doesn't matter. But if it is within there and it's something that you can at least get better at, you don't have to be perfect at it, but get better at it. It's really important to be realistic with yourself, find a good way that you can measure your improvement and step through that sort of, progression that you can have with those sort of skills. It can be demotivating, but I've found that anytime I'm demotivated, it's because I have unrealistic expectations for myself. And then I don't have a clear path forward on how to make progress with it. And if I would let go of fear, and if I would just be okay with not being great at things right off the top, then I would actually be a much better athlete and probably much better person in general. We actually talk about this a lot. Nate, maybe you can explain this a little bit, but we talk about like bullets and cannonballs. And many times, and also that iterative improvement, right, Nate, that it's better to constantly be working and out, or having something that you're doing and outputting, rather than just hoping that this one big thing is going to be your success. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So Bullets and Cannonballs is from, I think, Good to Great. It's Jim Collins, or it's Built to Last. I forget. But the idea is when companies go and do something, the best companies, they don't just say, hey, we're going to go after this strategy and throw all their money at it. They and shoot a cannonball. At first, they sight in with bullet to say like, ooh, do I want this? Or is this the right thing? Oh, no, we'll test it. That wasn't it. Let's move over a little bit. Let's do that. And then once they are on target, then they shoot a cannonball. So for us, that was the podcast, for example. We started we wasn't perfect. It wasn't like this production quality. We didn't have these good of mics. We didn't spend as much time on it, and we got it going. And then once we're like, hey, we're on target. And then we started spending more money on it. We had John this is like podcasting be his only job. We did planning meetings. We spend so much more time on it. We've got all these fancy mics and cameras and all that sort of stuff is throwing that cannonball. We go travel around, right, and do races and talk to people. That's an example. I'm not sure how that relates to cycling exactly, but
I think it's, and another good point with that too, is that we still put out a podcast every week along that projection or along that path, right?
Yep.
We didn't stop and wait until we were certain that we were good enough, and then we went for it. So for cycling, it's when you're talking about working on, I'm just going to use barriers and bunny hopping. Like, don't just assume that you'll get there once you just start to finish in the top 3 of whatever category you're in, that you'll just magically start to bunny hop barriers. And don't wait to get good at it before you start trying it, because you'll never get good at it. Instead, every day, just fire a little bullet, figure it out, start to get to the point where you actually say, oh, okay, this is how I can improve at this. And then at that point, iterate. Do it over and over and over and over again, There's that saying like practice makes perfect, but it's perfect practice. I hate that too. No one's doing perfect practice. Blah.
No.
Just try to constantly improve. So when you do something, say, hey, could I get better at this? Yeah, what should I do? And if you're always trying to look at how you can improve, that's the good kind of practice. That's all you have to do. Don't do perfect practice. You'll never start.
Well, that's a good point, though. Perfection is not on the table. And I don't think in a lot of cases mastery is either. I mean, You talk about firing cannonballs at the podcast here, maybe implying that we've achieved some level of mastery. We far from have. We're still working toward it. We're still chasing it because we're still invested in the process and we're enjoying ourselves along the way. But we have a lot of room to improve. With that said, we're pretty good at it by now. So we've gotten really good at this, and we focus on a lot of other things in a day, not just the podcast.
Yeah, we've gotten good at it by being bad at it and being okay with being bad at it, but getting better every day, right? Like that's the point. And this is interesting though, because the way that we look at the podcast, I listen to every podcast after we record it. I take notes on different things that we can improve on. And then after that, the next week when we have a planning meeting, we'll cover some of those things. We are constantly trying to improve, right? And I didn't have as much attention to those sort of details and room for improvement when we just started, where we are now. Like, it's changed and it's evolved. And you actually had a story about this, Amber, where the athletes, like these gymnasts that I believe were high school to collegiate level. Can you share that experience? Because I think this is super insightful.
Yeah. So this was a gymnastics coach that was sharing this, and I don't remember where I read it, but it was the coach was just sharing the story, and he was coaching collegiate freshman gymnasts who were obviously very successful in high school, had been recruited, they were at an NC2A Division I school, and the athletes were really frustrated, and they kept venting to their coach that they were not nearly as good now in college as they had been in high school. And the coach thought that was really strange because, generally speaking, you know, you get better the more you do it. But they were so insistent that they were worse in college than they had been in high school that he actually thought, well, maybe there's something to this. So he went back and he looked at tapes of them performing in high school, and it was so clear that they were worlds better in college than they had been in high school. And he realized what was actually happening. It wasn't that they were worse than they used to be. It was they had gotten so much better that their awareness of mistakes was so much better than it had ever been, right? So when you're learning how to do something, at first you're not even aware of your mistakes. And this is that kind of unconscious incompetence moving towards conscious incompetence, towards conscious competence, and then ultimately towards unconscious competence. But this is exactly what was happening is as they got better, their awareness of what they were doing went from seeing the mistakes after the fact to actually being aware of and detecting mistakes in real time. And all of that shifted their perception and made them think that they were actually not as good as they used to be when they weren't aware of their mistakes. And that's a really interesting process that a lot of us probably go through as you're learning a new skills. You get to a point where you're so much more aware of your mistakes than you ever were before, and that can feel discouraging, but it's actually a sign of really, really important progress.
Yeah, then we've all been there too, where like you feel like, oh man, did you see that sprint? How great it was! And then we see a video of ourselves, and we're like, oh wow, never mind. Meanwhile, and not to imply that Pete is a master sprinter, like, you know, they're athletes that are, of course, very, very good at sprinting that Pete wouldn't be able to compete with. But Pete's look at sprinting is different than mine. He's much more analytical. He's always looking for like a way to improve. Whereas I'm just looking at my head unit to see the numbers go up. Right. So, so it is like a really good point. The more experience you get in the process of improving a skill, the more aware you will be of your shortcomings. That's just how it goes. So, but all of this to say, kind of like circling back on this, that you're not supposed to be good at everything, and you're not supposed to be perfect at any one thing. But this whole process that we talk about constantly with training, with planning, training, and analyzing, rinse, repeat, as you improve, as you get faster, everything else in whichever area you're focusing on, it's just about being better than yesterday. That's it. Like, it's not about being perfect tomorrow.
And what you see for the people that are good, especially the three other than me, is you don't see the years and years and years to get them there. Mm-hmm. And even with myself, just to start TrainerRoad, I did so much programming. Oh man, it was like, I'd wake up at like 5 a.m. and I would literally go till like 10 or 11 at night every day for years, like at work and then at home, to try to improve my skills. And, you know, people don't see that sort of stuff. Kobe, like, known for his hard work effort through his whole life. LeBron James too, Michael Jordan, like all these people who are the best. No one just shows up and is good. And John seems to be really good in cycling, but he is, but it's the motocross days, right? And that's the skills all growing up and that sort of stuff. So that's just, don't worry about other people pretty much.
Yeah. Kate Courtney was on our podcast a while back, and she made a really insightful comment, and that was that she views her training as a range of different verticals, which is an interesting way of thinking about it. So there's the vertical of fitness, there's the vertical of skill, there's the vertical of mental toughness, and there's all of these different verticals that she's training at any one time. And, you know, in order to become better as a whole, well-rounded athlete. And each one of those things is interdependent upon, you know, with all of the others. You know, your mental toughness and your confidence is going to affect your skills and vice versa. So it's interesting to think about it in terms of, you know, different ways of improving as an athlete. And I think that Yeah, it's not a pretty process. And one of the things I want to just mention here, which is something that I've noticed in clinics that I do. So did a gravel clinic last year, and one of the days we did skills, and then the next day we went out and put those skills together on an actual ride. When we did the skills, we were just in a grassy field. We weren't doing some big monster ride. We were literally just working on ratcheting and just working on ratcheting over and over. And that's a really, really quote unquote simple thing to do. But if you don't stop, remove other distraction, and practice it with intention, you're not going to get as good as quickly as you could. And I think a lot of people just have this idea that like, oh, if I just go ride a bunch, I'm going to get better. You will. You absolutely will. But if you start to identify that there are certain things that you struggle with, maybe climbing, maybe cornering, whatever it happens to be, if you take time to focus on that specifically in its own context, you'll really make you'll make progress more quickly, and then you can assimilate those skills together in your next big ride.
Yeah, it's like a note that you have on here too, and I think this is a good one to start or to end on. The most skilled people have the biggest bank of embarrassing and frustrating experiences, and that's the truth, right?
Ooh,
so
I'm pretty skilled.
If that's the metric,
By that logic,
World champ.
that's important to break down that barrier of unattainability that we assign to a person or a skill. You know, it's there were plenty of days where that athlete that we admire and perhaps emulate, you know, they're not exceptional from mistake, right? They still make those mistakes. That happens. So. Okay, let's get into this next question from Mike. And I don't know why more people don't ask us about this. It's a great opportunity to talk about ourselves. So we will continue to do so and gladly take this one. He says, thank you, loving TrainerRoad, then the whole platform from the product to the blogs to the discussion board and of course the 5-star podcast. And speaking of the blog, actually, there was just an article posted about a handful of athletes. It just focuses on them really quickly about what they've done to basically and how they've improved their FTP. So if you want to get faster and improve your FTP, go check that one out. It's on the blog and you can check it out. Top article. Nate, did you have something you wanted to say there? Okay.
No.
Okay. So he says, as we settle into winter, I've built out a 1-year plan that includes a few hopeful key century and road race events for next year. So as I look forward to several months of pure indoor training on TrainerRoad, I want to maximize my use of the TrainerRoad app to motivate and measure my results. For example, how to use PRs to measure progress and motivate into the next early morning ride and not grab onto any vanity metrics. That's a really good question, right? It's easy to put your chess piece on the wrong side of the board there and kind of get distracted. Another question, are there other areas of the product that are commonly overlooked that may be helpful in measuring progress and motivating a person? And this is a part that we'll focus on there. And finally, I'm on a mid-volume plan. So I often toss in an extra filler workout, typically an endurance workout. Is there anything I should be considering when grabbing those filler workouts? Loving TrainerRoad and looking forward to a solid winter of training. In doing so, I want to make sure I'm making the most of the platform. Thank you, from Mike. So probably one of the, and we're going to try screen sharing here. So producer Aaron, the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain here, he'll likely bring this up and you'll be able to see what we're talking about. Yeah, let's do it. I'm listening to Aaron in my ear at the same time. So with this said, I want to talk about PRs. I feel like one of the most underutilized for me, one of the ones that I want to focus on. The PR tracking is one of the most underutilized ones. Number one, because you can get really specific with it. It's really frustrating when you have PRs. So a good example of this is cross-country mountain biking or a criterium course, where you know that you have like a climb that is 1 minute and 23 seconds. Let's just say it's shorter than that. It's 45 seconds, something like that. A lot of the time it's really frustrating because you can see like your 1 minute power, maybe your 2, and then your 5, and you don't get anything in between. And it's tough to track your PRs for that. So if you can see right now on the screen, we're looking at my account and you can see that the PRs actually, if Aaron hovers over those, you'll be able to see that it goes by second and then by time it'll track up. So that's cool. Number two, you can compare these PRs for any time frame you want. And we call it seasons. So that's super cool because another frustrating point for me, I remember one year I focused on cyclocross. And then the next year I didn't focus on cyclocross at all and I actually started my season late. So, but when I looked at like the year over year comparison, everything was broken because I had different years, right? So like, who cares? Like I would look at like, where am I and now in February compared to February last year. And it wasn't even comparable because there were totally different goals and I was training at a different level.
Yeah. Few riders start January 1st and go to December 31st. And you might also have two seasons. You can have a cross country season that maybe starts December 1st and goes to like June 1st. You could take some time off, then you could have a cyclocross season. And what if you could, like, comparing the PRs between those seasons, I think is so interesting to be able to see, to track your performance. It's motivating to maybe make adjustments if things aren't going the way that you want them to.
And you can even make seasons for things that are not necessarily season of training. Like, for example, if you're going to be staying in a certain area that's going to be a different elevation or something like that. If you go through a period of time and you were off the bike because you were injured or sick or focusing on something else, you can demarcate all of those as like separate seasons. So then you can pull them out and compare those or pull them out of a comparison and be able to get like a really clear idea of what they are. So I have a ton of seasons. I have everything from like, there's a housework 2020 season that I had because this year we're getting ready to sell the house. There's injury, there's all that other stuff. I usually break it down by phase too, like my 2021 base phase. And as you can see on screen there, that's what we're looking at there.
Aaron,
and they're really cool.
Sorry, Aaron, click on the endurance filter because you're on total right now. The thing about just click off that, Aaron. The thing that's there you go. That I don't like about regular PR charts is that so they're logarithmic. I can't say that word.
Logarithmic.
It's a log on the bottom. Yes, but then your 1 second power goes up so high that it scrunches the y-axis so that you can't see the differences at like your 5 and 10 minute power. So you can just focus in on sprint or endurance. Can I talk about season match for a second, John?
Yeah, please. That was the next thing to talk about right there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, please.
So what the season match is it, if whatever your current season is, how many days you are through that. So if you're in a season, you have it up and you click season match, what it does is it compares that many days into your other seasons. So if you are, let's say, you're starting your 2021 season and you are a month in. Well, if you compare to your 2020 season, you're not going to hit any of the PRs, right? Because you're only a month into 2021, and maybe your 2020 PRs were at your A race. But by doing season match, it compares you 30 days in to what the first 30 days of PRs were in your 2020 season. That way, as you step through it, you can see like, ooh, am I ahead where I was last year early in the season? Because none of us go just, every day is better than the last day. You kind of go up, you peak, and then you come down a little bit, and then hopefully you start at a higher level than you did before. And this is a great way to track fitness and performance between seasons or year over year.
Yeah, absolutely. Another thing to this too, which we can kind of change gears on this, Aaron, but switching over to Plan Builder, we still get so many questions from people that are like, hey, I'm doing this plan right now. Which plan do you think I should do next? And my answer, if I could tell all of you, is Plan Builder. Because we get so many of those questions, that's why we designed this feature. And we went through the effort of basically looking at a bunch of different scenarios and key principles that govern the decisions that you make in those scenarios. So basically codifying Chad's brain. We downloaded some of his brain and productized it here on basically what would Chad do if he had to rework your training plans for this. So when you go into Plan Builder and you actually click through, it lets you go through and you select how much time that you want to train. And so, whatever you want to select there, Aaron, go ahead and click through there. And then after that, it'll suggest whichever volume for you based off of how much time you've been training and or want to train, which is cool. Which in almost every case, by the way, we suggest people do a low volume plan. Start with that. I shouldn't say in almost every case. In many cases, lower than you think, because it's all structure. That can be tough. And then it's also always easy to add on more. You can just click on your calendar and make it a higher volume plan. But it's really tough if you've trained too much to pull yourself out of a hole, right? But once you click on that and select whichever volume you want, then it asks you your experience level. And then it gets into the really cool stuff where you can go through and you can actually select which events are on your calendar or add events to your calendar, A, B, and C priority. It lets you go through and add time off, all this cool stuff. And then you can go through and have like a whole plan that's built out for you. It'll truncate things, extend things. It's awesome. And it'll make sure that it's the right plan for the event you're doing. So super underutilized feature for sure. Chad, you have one on here on filtering workouts.
Not filtering workouts, filler workouts.
Filler.
Because he said his question was, is there anything I should be considering when grabbing filler workouts?
Mhm.
So I just wanted to address that one aspect of this. First and foremost, and maybe only, is your level of fatigue. Can you add filler workouts without increasing your fatigue to a point where it's counterproductive? This my mind just kind of wandered here a bit, and I figured this is as good a place as any to address this. But I do want to say, regarding MED, so the minimum effective dose, we've talked a lot about that in the last couple of podcasts that I've been on. I want to convey one thing, that MED is all good and fine, and the rationale behind it, if you can achieve the adaptive stimulus and the subsequent adaptations with this much work, why would you do more? Pretty simply because you like riding your bike. And I think filler workouts are that. You get all the quality, all the stuff that's necessary for you to improve your performance. But then what about just riding your bike because you like to ride your bike? And I think some filler workouts should be entirely that. So if you want to get out and just ride your bike, because it doesn't have to be a scheduled part of your plan. You can just recognize that my fatigue is at a point where I can manage an easy hour outside and I really want to get outside, or I want to go work on some other things. And those other things are your weaknesses or limitations. So use your filler workouts, again, if you're not in too high a level of fatigue, to target those weaknesses. Go out. If you're a mountain biker, practice your turns. If you're a road rider, maybe practice working out of the saddle. If you're a triathlete, maybe you work on your transitions. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be heavily fatiguing, but it is time effectively on the bike. And it's a great way to tack on additional training without incurring excessive training stress. And then my final suggestion is find ways, especially indoors, maybe almost exclusively indoors, to increase your cognitive load. And we've talked in the past, and even though this wasn't my intention, this was the outcome, is that I got on the bike and I wanted to read. My rationale being, if I'm going to sit at my desk and read, why not sit on the bike and turn 50% of threshold and read? I'll get something out of that in a couple of respects. So that's what I did. I also learned that I could still focus on the reading, still perform the writing, which is very second nature. If I was listening to some music, I couldn't handle vocals, so it became solo piano, which sounds all fancy, and it sounds, oh my god, I'm so cultivated, and that wasn't the intention there either. It was just those two worked together really well, so that by the time I got off the bike, I listened to some beautiful works of music. I learned a fair amount, and my learning is actually better when I'm doing a little bit of physical activity, I've found. And I got in an extra ride. All the time, unbeknownst to me, I was incurring a greater cognitive load, which does, as we've learned in recent months and years, have an impact on your training capabilities or your performance capabilities.
It's tricky to add that in when stakes are high, right? But when stakes are low, then it's a good time to do it, right, Chad?
Why not? Yes.
Yeah.
Or I wouldn't do that during a threshold or VO2 max workout.
Oh god.
Yeah.
Yes, I found the sweet spot is about as high as I can go with that.
Yeah. And for most people, sweet spot will be really tough for that. So it's worth mentioning.
I can't watch a movie and do sweet spot.
Same here. Some stuff that I want to jump into too. Thanks for keeping this up, Aaron. But I want to mention a couple other features in terms of keeping you focused on what matters. So PRs, that's like one of the best things that you can do. You can check that and always look at that. But I want to go into some of like the ride analysis stuff. So Aaron, perhaps you can go through, and I know if you're listening to the podcast, I'm going to try to narrate this as much as possible so you can hear, I guess, what we're seeing, if that makes sense. But if you go into any of like my previous rides and you look at that, there are a lot of features that are really good. So first of all, before you even do a workout, there are workout descriptions and goals, super underutilized. Chad writes those things with great intention because they help inform how you should execute the workout instead of just executing the workout. And I really recommend checking that out. So that's a really important thing. Check out the workout descriptions and goals that are going to give you insight. Next to that too, we have a bunch of different features. So like you can see your time and zones that you see for each workout that you're doing or that you've done, which can be helpful for sure. But you can also create like a custom zone within that. So we even have a coasting zone in there, which is really fun, especially when we're looking at criteriums. Like if Pete and I will finish close in a race, instantly we go, well, who coasted more? And we get to talk about that, which is really fun. But you can make a custom zone too. If, you were looking at a race and you really want to know, like, how much time did I spend in between this? Or you can even search for things by basically saying, I want to find every instance where, and this is called interval search, every instance where I went over 600 watts and I did that for more than 2 seconds to see how many times you actually went through and you were like sprinting and doing all that stuff when you probably shouldn't have been sprinting, right?
That's the wrong workout for that.
Yeah.
A sweet spot
Bad
workout.
example. I apologize, Aaron, for that one. But this is really useful when you've got like some sort of a race and you're trying to find when, man, I really was way less efficient than I thought. Nate was a great example of this in our race analysis that we have from last year of just surfing the back like a shark, waiting, not letting everything get him like pull him out of that plan and then attacking when it mattered. So this is a really cool feature that you can do with that too. And then when you look at your ride analysis on TrainerRoad, we've tried to just include what matters. There were a lot of meetings on this, right, Nate and Chad, like when we were like, which metrics do we want to include? And there was a lot of trimming of fat, a lot of consideration, a lot of talk that went on throughout the whole company for different riders of different types to be able to find out what really matters. Because the biggest thing that we didn't want to risk is exactly what you're talking about in this case, Mike, of getting focused on the wrong things and getting pulled away. So we've worked really hard to make sure that all the metrics that are there should just drive you toward performance metrics that actually matter.
More metrics aren't better. That's like so key. There's just got to be a reason. Like, how does that then impact your training or motivate you more or something like that? If there's no reason on any of that, it's just interesting, then it's not useful in our opinion.
And the final thing I want to mention too, and Aaron, if you want, you can cut the screen share too, because I'm just going to mention this on the app. You mentioned motivation. And one of the big things is we've designed TrainerRoad kind of with the concept, well, entirely with the concept for you to BYOE, if you will, bring your own entertainment, because we know what motivates you best rather than us deciding for you. So then when you use it on the desktop app, you can use it and put it in minimal mode. So it pins it to the bottom and you can watch Netflix, watch your bike races, watch whatever else you want to watch, and then group workouts. So your question specifically about like how to increase motivation, group workouts are super helpful. You can go onto the forum and there's a whole thread about scheduling group workouts, and you can join in and see if other people are on there and say, hey, I'm going to do Pettit at this day, at this time. And you'll get some folks that'll join in with you, and it's really cool. And you'll get to meet some people and do some workouts there. So hopefully that answers that one for you. Okay. Samuel's question. He says, I was a regular lifter before lockdown, shut down my gym for 6 months. After I resumed my leg workouts in the gym when it reopened, I got super sore for days after, just like a brand new lifter. So he had DOMS, something that a lot of us experience when we get into that. That got me thinking, if the majority of gains for new lifters, and there are assumptions in this, I just want to throw this asterisk out there right now. There are assumptions that we'll discuss in just a bit. But he says, if the majority of gains for new lifters come from neuromuscular connections versus increased muscle mass, why do our muscles become so sore after a lifting session? Aren't sore muscles a symptom of torn muscles? And do our muscles build themselves back but maintain the same size until the neuromuscular gains are maxed out? Back in March, I could have performed a decently tough deadlift, and it sounds like now he's struggling with that. So first of all, I feel you, Samuel. All of us go through this. This is pretty normal. And I guess like there's probably a few main questions that we want to cover. The first one, why does strength training make me sore? And I know that sounds probably silly, but diving into the details, I feel like it's a good prerequisite for this conversation, right, Chad?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So soreness, or what we refer to as delayed onset muscle soreness, or DOMS, is just like you pointed out, it's due to actual muscle damage. So in this case, it's muscular microtrauma. And it's not limited just to the muscles either. It can actually affect the connective tissue to some extent. In the literature, and you might often see this just in other places, it's EIMD, so exercise-induced muscular damage. But basically, it's just damage. That is part of what spurs growth. So even with the neural adaptations actually leading the charge, muscle damage still occurs. Anytime we do anything that's novel or unaccustomed, that will probably it's going to inspire some level of fatigue. Often enough, it'll inspire some level of minor muscle damage, which will in turn lead to delayed onset muscle soreness. Also, these neuromuscular adaptations that you're talking about take place concurrently with muscular adaptations. So it's not just a matter of how well the brain communicates with the muscles. There's also things taking place in the muscles. This happens at the same time. I don't know that you could extricate one from the other, not tidally. I don't even think it's possible. So it's, I think there's a little confusion here. There's a confusion here on a few matters. And one is that DOMS can happen at any stage of lifting. Again, if it's unfamiliar, and that is you haven't adapted to it, perhaps you're evolving things too quickly, progressing them too quickly, or these are just adaptations that have reversed. Maybe you were a good lifter. Maybe you could do a decently tough deadlift. You can't do one now. So it shouldn't be surprising that trying to do one is basically an unfamiliar activity that can actually cause or inspire muscle damage.
This is Chad, this also extends to like even just doing an exercise differently, like an athlete that's just doing leg press versus switching to squats. Like, even though it seems like it's the same motion, it actually can be, you're probably going to be very sore in different ways.
Yeah. So in that case, it's not familiar. It's quite familiar, but some aspect of that is novel or unaccustomed. It's a little bit different than you were doing it before. I say this mostly tongue in cheek. I don't really mean this, but I think the only possible solution for bypassing muscle soreness and moving yourself through to what we as cyclists pursue, which is improvements in maximal strength, is to never perform more than 3 reps. And I'm going to warn you right now, this is going to be a slow trajectory. I want you to go in and I want you to grab the bar and do 3 deadlifts. And you can do 5 sets of it. Give yourself the requisite 4 or 5 minutes in between sets and go back and do another 3. Come back next workout, slap some 2.5s on each side. It's going to take you a little time, but you will probably never experience DOMS.
But the objective is not to avoid DOMS, right, Chad? Like,
no, it's absolutely not.
It's part of the process, right?
It is and it isn't. I mean, it's going to happen because we outpace our adaptive capabilities at times. It's just part of the learning process. You don't know until you do it, right? So it's not a necessary part, and we'll elaborate that on a bit, but it's a pretty common occurrence.
Yeah. Let's go into like the neuromuscular part, like the question of what does neuromuscular mean in different phases as a lifter?
This is where I think most of the misunderstanding is with this particular question. So initial gains are neuromuscular in nature, but simultaneously some increases in mass are either, the foundation is being laid, they're not far behind. And this is tied very strongly to the type and the volume of lifting that you're doing. It's in a way, it's similar to simply riding lots. And so if the intensity and or the duration are sufficient, so the volume is enough, even just riding your bike at 50 or 60% for many hours will lead to increases in this fiber size in your slow twitch muscles, what's termed cross-sectional area. So it may not seem like you're doing any work, but you're doing something and you're doing enough of it that it does inspire muscular changes. And all the while, there will be some neuromuscular activity going on too. So let's look at let's compare the beginning lifter, and then we'll also relate this to cyclists. So yes, initially strength gains are largely neural. They're largely neuromuscular. So the neural connections, from the brain to the muscles, and we'll see that in the form of a lot of things. The movement patterns, for instance, will improve. Your coordination will improve. So try to do a single leg squat. Having never done one before, it'll be pretty sloppy. A few weeks later, might look pretty good, and then you can start loading it more heavily, whatever. But initially, you're establishing proper movement patterns and reinforcing good coordination. You'll get, you'll improve the number of fibers that you recruit and the synchronicity of those fibers. So these fibers are already there. They just aren't really in action, and they don't really know how to play nice together. So you're going to reinforce those aspects. You'll decrease, and we talked about this just a few podcasts ago, you'll decrease the inhibition. So, when your quads want to extend the knee, but your hamstrings haven't really figured out how to let go so that your quads can do this unimpeded, this is something that improves with repetition. And by the same token, or in a similar manner, non-relevant fibers. So all these fibers that may be kind of supporting the movement, or they're de-recruited, so to speak, because the fibers that do the movement have gotten so good at it that they don't need assistance from others, and which kind of leads to a lower cost form of support from these stabilizers and these synergists. So you just get good at moving. But as you're doing this, some mass is almost unavoidable. And it's especially so if you plan to eventually move on to heavy lifts. So simply through repetition, and repetition is a necessary component in order to achieve proficiency. And that repetition is likely going to yield a little bit of hypertrophy, a little bit of increased cross-sectional area, a little increase in lean mass. but that proficiency is absolutely requisite prior to heavy lifting. You got to be very good at this before you're going to put a bunch of weight on your back or try to pick it up off the ground or press it or whatever it's going to be. Did you want to say something, Amber?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of the inhibition, that's huge. If you can, if oftentimes we carry more tension in our muscles than we actually need. And if you can learn to relax that through inhibition and just that neuromuscular motor pattern training, it's a huge thing, not only in life in general, but also on the bike. If you're not having to recruit as much muscle, if you're recruiting more muscle than you actually need, it's a waste of energy. So this is a really cool thing too.
That's why we feel like Bambi on ice a lot of the times when we try to do something fresh and new, because we haven't quite figured that out yet. Like sprinting is a great example. Every year when I start working on sprinting, I just feel awkward and I don't feel fluid. I don't feel smooth and effective. But with practice, I then figure it out. So once again, to this point that, this is a part of the process for all of the movements that we're doing. And it happens all the time. Like we have to, these aren't things that are sticky and just last forever, in the sense that, if you've lifted hard in the past, in this specific scenario, lifted hard in the past, now struggling with it, it makes sense because your body has to keep up on those sort of things. If it doesn't, then it starts to lose it. So yeah, Chad, is there anything else you want to cover before we go on to the next question?
Yeah. So one last point is that when we look at cyclists in particular, we're always talking about neural adaptations because cyclists are so intent, and rightly so, on avoiding increases in mass, whether it's lean or otherwise. What we are targeting though is increases in maximum strength. So we want to be stronger. We just don't want to cart around any extra weight in the process of achieving that or being able to do it. So that's what we want, but you still have to recognize that progression, just like it is with endurance training, is still part of the picture. And not to use strength training terminology, but there has to be a process of anatomical adaptation. So this training is what's necessary to, again, create that proficiency. And it is a combination of the neuromuscular adaptations we talked about, and often enough increases in cross-sectional area, bigger muscles, and a few things that go along with that. But those things have to be in place in order for you to safely and productively transition to maximum strength training, where you can do those low rep, very heavy lifts that bring about the changes that we target as cyclists. And then, after that, you can move into maintenance. That's a whole other story, but it has to happen in a particular order, or you're setting yourself up for either a reduced return on your training investment, or you're probably going to injure yourself. And I can speak from experience on that matter.
Yeah. Nate, did you have something you wanted to add? I couldn't tell.
Nope.
Okay, cool. The other question with this, and this is a big one, and we've talked about this before, us cyclists many times get attached to, if there's not discomfort attached to something or something else like that, then we feel that it's easy to feel that there's no progress involved. And that's a bad connotation to have. Yes, progress comes through discomfort, but progress isn't always productively gained through discomfort, right? And there's like a big difference between productivity and everything else. So the question of, is soreness required to get improvement from strength training? Because a lot of cyclists have this thought, and before you jump into this, Chad, where it's like, you've seen this and you've called it out so many times, where cyclists are like, I lift early in the off season or the base phase, and it really blows me out. It's really tough. And then after that, I got my strength work done for the year and I ride that wave for the rest of the year. And it's like, it's good when it makes me sore. And then after that, I keep lifting and I'm no longer sore. So I don't need to keep lifting, because clearly, since I'm not sore, it's not doing anything, is the assumption. So do you want to challenge that, I assume?
Yeah. Well, first let's talk about the question, right? Is soreness required for you to improve in strength training, and for that strength training to benefit, in our case, being faster, better cyclists? Delayed onset muscle soreness, DOMS, indicates excess, full stop. That's it. So it's not bad. It's not good. It just says you have outpaced your adaptive capabilities. You went too fast, you overdid it, and now you're going to pay the price for it. And it's typically not going to last very long, 1, 2, maybe 3 days. But that's simply how it works. And it's funny, and this happens to me dang near every time I go on a trip where we don't have a car, or it's just a metropolitan sort of area. So you do a heck of a lot of walking. But we're endurance cyclists. I do run a bit, or I did. I ride my bike a ton, But if I go walk around city streets for 2 or 3 hours and I do that for a couple of days in a row, even on that second day, I'm already noticing I'm sore in interesting places. My low legs are sore, my feet are sore, my ankles are sore, because again, it's unaccustomed, it's unfamiliar. So when you add strength training, what's that?
Oh, Nate. Oh, Nate.
We were all thinking it. I saw your smiles.
No, I was actually just thinking, I have had this, like, I love the comment, the interesting places. I'm like, I have totally experienced that where you're like, I didn't even know I had a muscle there and it hurts. Like, what is that?
Sorry, Chad. I was just joking.
That's okay. I know. I know you say it with love. Okay, so what I'm trying to get across is that overdoing it is not necessary to attain improvement. It's simply not. And improvement is positive adaptations. We can have adaptation in both directions. I mean, we can also stagnate. So if we're looking for positive adaptation, the common knowledge is common. I don't know. People seem to think that they have to overdo it. They have to push themselves to a point where it hurts. And that whole no pain, no gain idea, I'm here to tell you, is often nonsense. Not all the time, because it is absolutely necessary sometimes, certainly not all the time. And you could almost tie this back to that minimum effective dose that seems to be a real popular topic with us lately, and that DOMS is clear evidence that you've exceeded it. Again, if the minimum effective dose is this and I go a little beyond it, probably going to deal with, to some degree, a little bit of delayed onset muscle soreness, at least in the context of resistance training.
Oh, sorry, Nate, please.
The key thing that I heard, which especially when you lift and ride a bike, the phrase in the gym you should be thinking of is stimulate, don't annihilate. I used to in college just try to annihilate everything, right? So you're like, oh, I can't walk out of the gym. I can't pick my arms up. You do drop sets down to like 20 pounds on bench press until you do it. Leave some reps in the tank. Like when, you laugh at this, Amber, but I'm a dude. So this is like ego-driven weightlifting. And this is what we did in college. That was the thought. Like, I'm going to do 9 sets of chest and they're all going to go until I can't lift my arms up. But
I hate to do it.
Some reps. What? Yeah.
But I hate to do it, but I'm going to make fun of CrossFit again. And I think this is
you don't hate to do it.
This is part of why CrossFit kind of fell apart. I mean, they got kicked in the gut, or wherever they got kicked, because this was kind of what was promoted, whether it was intentional or not. I mean, you look up any of the workouts, and one that springs to mind is Murph, where you wear a weight vest and you do an amazing amount of pull-ups and push-ups and some running. It's absolutely brutal. People knew going into it that their arms would be useless for probably the better part of a week. I mean, 3 or 4 days afterwards, because it was
T-Rex
so
arms.
severe. Yeah, I mean, it just hurts you so bad. But they're telling themselves, this will make me stronger. It'll definitely make you tougher, but this will make me a stronger athlete, a better CrossFitter, a better athlete in general.
Yeah. One thing I want to add to this that has absolutely nothing to do with strength training, but you mentioned minimum effective dose enough that I have to say it. 400 Watts Club. Everyone should check them out on Instagram. They've done some incredible illustrations. There's a very talented illustrator of Chad in particular, Nate and Keegan with their challenge too. The 370 watt challenge. There you go. Nate's drinking. But he needs, please, 400 Watts Club, please design the shirt of Chad with minimum effective dose and whether it's a shot of something or something. We need that shirt. I'm going to buy it. So yeah, exactly. Minimum effective dose. It'd be so good. So, okay. I'm going to leave it. This is podcast host choice here. Should we jump into crank length now, or should we jump into rapid fire? What say you?
Rapid fire.
I like that. Okay. We'll go back to crank length.
No one else cares.
No.
I was taking first answer on that one. Okay. This one, rapid fire from Cohen. What are the advantages of cross-country mountain biking for my road training?
None. Next question.
Kind of true though. Honestly, you'd be better off training for road. That's like, you really would be. So, okay. Rita's question. What has the lack of racing brought on by COVID-19 taught you about your relationship with cycling? This one requires some pondering.
Well, I haven't been racing for a long time, so mine is less related to COVID-19 than anything else, but I love cycling. Full stop. I love cycling, whether I'm racing or not.
Same. It's that simple. I love riding my bike.
I like to race more than just riding my bike, for sure.
Yeah.
But I already knew
for
that.
me, you knew that beforehand, you're saying?
Yeah, COVID didn't teach me that. I knew it.
What did COVID teach you? Anything?
Nothing. Like, not about cycling. Like, taught me a lot of stuff. I know a lot more about viruses and stuff, but I do not know.
Sure.
I don't know if it's like my relationship. Like, we already knew each other pretty well.
It taught me that I don't need races to train, even though I thought I did. I thought I needed something on my calendar to train. Turns out I don't. I really like the training process. And then it also taught me how much I do miss racing, though. So I can't, like yesterday when I was in the middle of my workout, I found myself closing my eyes because I was watching one of our race analysis videos. And I found myself like closing my eyes and envisioning like the end of a race. And I was so sad realizing that hasn't been a reality for a really long time.
Oh.
Like, I'm more eager to race a criterium right now than I am a cross country race, like by a lot. So I can't wait to race crits again. Okay.
I was just going to add one more point. I think one thing I do really miss is less about the races, but just more about seeing people. You know, there's so many events that were tent stakes in my calendar where I'd go and I know I'd get to see, you know, this group of people or that person that I don't get to see usually. And those connections I do really miss.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. The people. Pete and I are thinking of doing our own solo TT competitions, socially distanced, on Saturdays now, just to try to do something like that. So We'll see. 10-mile TTs. You in, Nate?
Nope. Saturday's my day off.
Oh, that's right. Well, you can do it on Sunday too, of course. Yeah. Socially distanced. Who cares when you do it? Okay.
I got a plan, bro. Use plan builder.
Very good point. Okay. This next one says, this is Brad. I'm 63 and I'm semi-retired and have to train. He says, I want to either get the belt buckle at Leadville or finish successfully, he says, and competitively in the over 60 age group, I assume. At Unbound Gravel. If I focus on my training on the if I focus my training on FTP, I'm afraid I would be really fit for 1 to 3 hours and be drained for an ultra event. I'm thinking I should focus more on zone 2 and some zone 3 and forego some speed and think more in terms of the FTP for 3 hours. I'm thinking, he says, my thinking is to think of it in terms of 200 watts for 3 to 4 hours rather than 300 watts for 1 hour. After all, when the ultra event is over, I can build off base and go back to hour power FTP and shorter time trials. Thanks for your time and input. And I hope I was clear, from Brad. This is the super common question, right? Longer events. Shouldn't I do longer stuff?
Yeah. And we just touched on this earlier when we were talking about Nate and Leadville. It goes back to training energy systems. You train the energy system up to its utmost, or at least improve on it. And you can steer it at a whole number of things. You don't have to do 8-hour rides to be able to do 8-hour rides. As you get closer and closer to your events, your specificity has to increase. So maybe your long weekend ride was 3 hours and now it's 4, maybe it gets up to 5 or 6. But again, if you're going to go out and race 8 hours, it doesn't mean you have to be good at doing 8-hour rides.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say for that event in particular, being able to put out some punchy power is really, really helpful. So being able to put out some short power and recover from that, that's going to help a lot.
We saw that PR chart. When you raise your FTP, everything to the right of it also raises, because when you're raising your FTP, you're raising aerobic power. But as Chad said too, as you do more, do those longer stuff, there's position, right? It's nutrition, pacing. There's all these things that you can get on by doing longer rides to be able to improve your performance on race day. So it's still good to do that, but I wouldn't shy away from doing some VO2 max work, some over-unders, some thresholds, some sweet spot. All that stuff's going to make it where your 200 watts is going to feel easier for 3 to 4 hours than it did before at a lower FTP.
For sure. And it's important to point out too that when you train one zone, it's not just affecting that zone. Training a particular zone can have beneficial effects across different zones as well.
Yeah, there's this really cool, I don't know if I should say this. Anyways, we do this, I'll say a little bit. I'll say it in a vague way. We do some analysis inside of TrainerRoad. We're doing some workouts, how those impact other energy systems. And it's until you get to sprint, and also up and down. Does endurance work impact FTP? No. Does FTP impact endurance work? Heck yes. Which is kind of interesting, right? That they don't go both ways. They only go one way. So we have this matrix thing where we look at all different energy systems impacting all different ones to see does sprinting impact endurance? Does endurance impact sprinting? Endurance does not impact sprinting either. It's just as Amber said, it's not just oh, if you do threshold, you're only good at threshold and nothing else improves, which is totally not the case. I've heard some people say that on the internet, and I'm like, I have the day, like, that's not, I got proof.
Yeah.
Hard numbers.
I'm not the only one either. Lots of people have proof.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Next one's from Tony. He says, rapid or moderately slow fire question incoming. First, awesome podcast and product 5 stars given everywhere possible. And thanks, you can do that, by the way. Just rate the podcast, however you're listening to it. Give us 5 stars if we deserve it. And if we don't, let us know what we can do to improve. Just go to TrainerRoad.com/podcast and let us know. More ratings on the podcast make it so that it's more likely to be suggested to other people. So when it's rated recently, that helps it rank a little bit higher. So it helps the world get a little faster.
Just pick up your phone right now, please, and do 5 stars if you like us, because that's all you have to do, and it takes you maybe 15 seconds, and it helps us a ton.
Yep, and it's with the podcast, the app, all the stuff. You can do it.
The app is huge.
So, yep. It says, I have limited time to devote to training and still regularly drop my buddies who ride a ton more than me. Tony, proving what we just talked about right there. You don't need a ton of time to be able to make these sort of improvements. He says, I can't believe you haven't answered this critical question yet. Saddlebag or no saddlebag? What say ye? I have to hold back on this one, or else I'll blow it out of the water. Yeah. I think we have. Yeah, maybe.
Yeah, we have. I know. So you're going to say put it in your pocket. So you say, because you don't like the weight on your bike, because you can feel the 100 grams on your bike and it totally messes up all the handling. You got to get that stuff low on your bike. If you do put it on your bike, like a swap box or something like below the bottom bracket. Did I get you right?
Yes. I'm going to check out. This is great. Thanks, Nick.
Where I'm coming from too. I don't like the weight to be high. That's the highest point on my bike. I don't like the weight to be up there. And I know my body's higher. I understand the argument. It's just a preference.
Chad? Mm-hmm. Oh, you're not Amber?
I'm neutral on this. I've tried both ways. And I do have a saddlebag actually that I really like that works under the saddle for me. And that's kind of nice because I like carrying extra bottles and more food in my pockets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So
you guys know I like snacks.
I'm going to flip it on his head, Nate. Oh, actually, you go first. I think that you were going to say something.
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off. Yeah.
I don't like saddlebags, but I love this specialized SWAT little holder because it's tucked up so far beneath and it looks cool. And then what are those new spare tires? Turbolito? Is that what it's called?
Tubolito. Yeah.
Tubolito. Those things, oh my gosh, you save like 50 grams, but they are teeny tiny. They're orange. You can buy them online, but you can tuck those up there. And I like having one without having something on your back. It's a performance increase because you're not as hot. Like if you put a whole bunch of tubes and stuff in there, you sweat and it just is not cool. Second, it's easy to forget something if you put everything in your pocket. And you can put it inside of like a case that you then put in your pocket, but that's just more weight and more annoyance. And then third, you got to have a pocket for your phone, a pocket for like fresh gels, and a pocket for trash. And then if you need to carry a bottle, like Amber said, that's even harder. So I never ever put it, I'm always upset if I put it in my pocket. The only thing I will is if I'm racing, I'll put in a stands, like a plug with the CO2 right there, so that if I need to get it out quickly, I don't have to reach into anything. I can just bloop right outside and do it.
Yeah, I'm gonna flip it on its head. None of the above. Cargo bibs. That's the answer. Cargo bibs are the greatest thing on earth. I don't know if you guys have used them yet. Yes, but the thing is, I don't know, when you're wearing pockets and weight on your jersey and you hit bumps, you notice it more. When you have it on the side of your legs, I think that you're lifting more weight, so it's probably bad. I don't know, but you never notice it. So it's playing some sort of a mind trick on me, but it's incredible. And they're very comfortable to be able to use to be able to stash things that you would to then free up pocket space or anything else like that. I love cargo bibs. It's a lovely
I'm going to hide like 100 grams of lead underneath you and Chad's saddle, and you're not going to notice. It's going to be there for 4 months.
That's true.
Not my argument. I don't think it makes a difference. It's in my head.
Okay. It's in your head. It's in your head.
It's in my head and I will notice. Challenge me. Let's do it. So Nate questions me on this a lot. Like the little things, like when I'm like, oh no, I can tell a difference in tire pressure. He's like, you actually can't. You don't know. So, but
should we get
you've underestimated my fussiness. I am endlessly fussy.
Let's save that.
We'll save it for another time.
But let's say it.
Yeah. I'm endlessly fussy.
We only have 35 minutes left, so we can't cover that one.
Madeline says, I'm a 7-week user of TrainerRoad, using it with a Tax Flux 2 trainer. I'm curious, how is TrainerRoad estimating the distance in the workout, as I see exactly the same workout done at distance? He's mentioning Pettit, or Madeline's mentioning Pettit in this case, of 1 week, with a difference of 11 watt higher average, around 8% increase, with a higher cadence of 92 to 90, and TrainerRoad estimates almost the same distance of 23.39 kilometers compared with 23.37. So how's distance estimated when you're inside on the trainer?
Yeah, it's just whatever your trainer reports. That's what we do. This goes back to like, does it matter and make you faster? And we've gone back and forth so many times internally, and it always gets pushed out, this sort of thing, for other features. I did one on the forum about it. Basically, your trainer reports a speed, and if you're in erg mode, it's just going to matter what gear you're in. So you could be doing 100 watts, but you could be in a huge gear and be going, air quotes, fast. Then people say, well, you should do a physics model or something around it, and then you have to put in the height, which we could do, or it could just be this, or then there's a whole nother group that goes, don't send any distance. You don't go anywhere on the trainer. So let me choose 0 so that it doesn't mess up any of my other distance. Our kind of thought internally is to have all three things, to say trainer, distance, physics model, which isn't that hard, just based on your average power in some kind of course, and then or send no distance. But that too, it takes a little bit of time. I've always wanted, like I said in the forum too, like someone in college, you can make a little microservice, put on AWS or put on Azure, accept a fit file and with the parameters, and then send this stuff back. That'd be a great little project that you could do. You could even make it open source or whatever, but if you ever, not saying that we would specifically hire you, but that would definitely make you seriously, if you want to have somebody notice you, doing that sort of thing would be awesome. But also, if you want to do a career in software engineering, that sort of project is not going to hurt at all. And be able to go into a job interview and say, I built this, especially say, I built this, now this company is using it and millions of things are going through it and it works. That is like so much. You are now heads and shoulders above everyone else who's just getting out of college completely.
That's a great point, Nate. So to recap, distance is somewhat irrelevant since you're inside and not moving, but at the same time, there are different ways to calculate it. Yet TrainerRoad at this point, we aren't calculating anything. We're just taking the distance your trainer gives us. So
when I was on my 5311 on my road bike and I would stick it in that, every Strava time, one person would go like, how'd you go 30 miles per hour for 2 hours? Every time. The other people would start answering for me. So that was nice.
Yeah. Eric says, I have a question about ramp tests. Why is it necessary to have a stepped ramp rather than a gradual one for testing on a smart trainer? I always wonder about this and at the start of the test, but by the end, I usually can't remember my name. Thanks for all you do, and 5 stars on everything. Nate, do you want to start off on this one? Why we have steps?
Have Chad start off.
Cool. Okay. Go ahead, Chad.
Okay. First off, I'm going to let you in on a little inside baseball. It's always stepped. It doesn't matter. No matter how gradual, it's going to have to come up a little at a time. So it's always stepped. We step in 1 minute increments because we're basically emulating a VO2 max test. And we're using what we estimate your power at VO2 max to be to estimate your FTP. It's all very, very technical. You don't want to know the details behind it, but just suffice it to say, this is basically the protocol most researchers use when they're trying to, or when they're probably testing subjects prior to whatever interventions they're going to throw at them. This is a really commonly utilized VO2 max test protocol.
And there's tons of testing and refining to get to that point that we did to have what we have for the test. So,
yeah, the idea is we just want to increase your oxygen uptake gradually. We don't want it to happen all at once. Otherwise we get too much anaerobic contribution, and we don't want it to happen over too long a term because we end up getting too high a level of muscle fatigue. So we're trying to kind of find a sweet spot between those two things where we target largely gradually bringing up your oxygen uptake consumption.
And this isn't the reason why we did steps, but you should just know this, that if on certain smart trainers, especially some older firmwares, that if you send too many erg commands, erg meaning change the resistance, too quickly, the trainer will crash. Like, that sounds funny, but the firmware will crash on the trainer, and then you have to unplug it and plug it back in. So that's something that we have to guard against in the code and stuff to make sure that messages aren't sent too quickly to these units.
I just want to point out, I'm really impressed that Chad managed to work a sweet spot in there, not even referring to training zone. That was well played.
Good dad joke, Chad. Fantastic.
It's part of my vocabulary. I can't avoid it.
Kai says, winter is here. What are your best cold weather riding tips or hacks, clothing, nutrition, pre and post ride strategies, etc.? I recently started putting toe warmers in my shoes, and he mentions, I don't think he's talking about stuffing the thing you put over your shoe in your shoe. I think he's actually talking about the little toe warmer packs that you can get that, well, you rub them together, then they generate their own little heat there. So he says, I really just recently started doing that and it works out pretty well. Greetings from the cold and windy Netherlands. Tip number 1, ride inside. I think it's fair to say. That's it. But then I guess if you're
Next
racing
question.
outside, yeah.
Oh, racing. Okay, we can talk about racing.
Yeah, racing's a good point, right? There's actually a blog post that we have, a winter training guide, 11 ways to become a faster cyclist. And it's actually pretty good. So it walks through plenty of things that we talk about inside and outside for this sort of thing. I guess I'll just mention one thing. I have Raynaud's, so I'm Raynaud's syndrome, super sensitive to cold weather, and it can cause a cascade of issues that can even keep me entirely off the bike and almost like entirely off of physical activity. So I have to take it really seriously. If I don't, it's very painful. So what I do is anytime I ride outside and it's like 50 degrees or below at that level, I have shoe warmers over my shoes, but then I also take the little toe warmer packets or hand warmer packets that you can get that you shake to have heat. And I put that in between my shoe and my shoe warmer. That really helps keep my feet warm. Cause that's the biggest thing is I can't keep my feet warm. Even in like 60-degree weather, I frequently can't feel my feet. So I have really bad circulation issues with that. So that's one of the main things I do. And then get ready to drink again. Make sure everything close to skin is merino wool if I can. What's
that, John?
I'll leave it at that. Do some Googling. You can figure it out. But it's great at temperature regulation. And dealing with sweat. So that's what I do. Chad.
So skiing has turned me on to the fact that heated gloves and heated socks exist. So you could go that route. It's a bit pricey. On the cheaper side, I've also discovered lobster gloves, which on the rare occasion I do venture outside in temperatures that necessitate full gloves. Lobster gloves are really quite impressive. I mean, it's just 2 fingers per digit, right? But it makes a surprisingly big difference when you can push 2 fingers against one another. I was impressed.
There's like the full lobster glove where you put 4 fingers in, and
no, it's the Vulcan ones.
Okay, even that. So we
Chad's doing the Star Trek Vulcan sign for those who don't know.
I did like a charity big mountain bike ride, and someone had really never biked before. They showed up with jean shorts, and they put on 4 pairs of underwear because they didn't want their bottom to hurt. But they had full lobster gloves on, and when you're mountain biking, trying to hit the brakes with cold monster. You can't do it. So like those, even with 2, right? You got to put 2 fingers on to hit the brakes mountain biking. That's no bueno. So don't
beware.
I would not do lobster gloves really. That sounds, you could lose some grip on the bar and some control.
Amber, you're a Northeasterner. So you probably have like other tips that we don't even think of.
Yeah, I think the main thing is making sure your extremities are warm. So having really good quality gloves, making sure that your feet are warm. So whether that's with toe covers, shoe covers, you can even buy winter cycling boots. That was a game changer for me. It's kind of a pricey investment, but if you do plan to ride outdoors in the cold a long time, that's like a really good, that was money well spent. And I actually developed, you mentioned Raynaud's. I didn't realize this, but a few years after moving to Austria and training through the winters there, I think I developed it, or I wasn't aware of it up to that point, but cold urticaria. And it's where you actually have an allergic reaction to the cold, which was awesome because then I could tell my coach, sorry, coach, I can't ride. I'm allergic to cold. But what it really meant was if my skin was too exposed or not insulated enough, when I got back from my ride, I would break out in hives in those places. So I had to be really vigilant about making sure that I had, insulation. So it wasn't effective for me to wear just leg warmers and have, regular Lycra shorts. I needed to have thermal bibs, and that all of that really helped a lot. So I would just say, experiment with gloves and shoes in particular, because your core will heat up quite a bit. Your big giant cycling muscles in your legs will also heat up with the work, but it's those extremities. So ear coverings too, really, really important.
Last thing, and to add to that on the ear coverings, a buff. So the neck gaiter wool ones, if you can get them, are really good ones to get. And those things are so versatile. Pete and I famously employ the double buff technique, where you put one on the neck, and then after that, you take the other one and you lift it up so it's partially on your head. And then it really keeps the wind off, and then also covers your ears, which is a really helpful one. I mean, actually, I just want to mention one thing because I think it supports a really good cause. There's a company called Skida, Skida, and they actually I saw today, they're making headbands that and neck gaiters that have, you might have seen this on Corey Williams, the cyclist for Legion, but the equality print that he has that's on shoes and everything else. So these neck gaiters and buffs, they have that same print on them, and a large portion of all proceeds from that go to Legion to support them. So if you're interested in that, we'll put the link down below in this and you can check that out. Good cause that keeps you warm.
Don't use like buffs for COVID. They don't work. There's studies of this. Yeah. They're meant to be breathable, right? And you can blow out candles with them and stuff. Use a real mask. I see those, and I've seen cyclists use them. There's a great study where I forget what university did it, but they measured like the droplets out of your mouth, and a buff and a bandana was zero different between none, zero difference. Yeah. So you're pretty much not using one. So I just stay away from those people. And then the biggest thing for racing is either start cold or be really good at taking off your layers and be able to put someplace. And I've had it where I like a tight vest. Taking a vest off while you're riding is its own skill. And please don't do it in the middle of the peloton. I've seen people I'm sure John can do it. I'm sure Amber can do it. I don't know if Chad can do it. I'm sure Pete can do it, but I don't know you. And I've seen people try to do it and they swerve and the whole peloton freaks out. So just get to the back and take it off in the back. I'm sure in the pro level, like with Amber, all the pros could do it. But I've actually had to I don't want to take an arm off, and I've had to ask someone to pull it off a little bit and help me to get it off. So just be aware of it can be hard to strip while in a peloton racing.
Let's get into Garrett's question, and the question that we all really came here for. Yeah, we're just going to gloss over the last sentence that Nate did there. So, it's
too right.
That's what you're doing.
It's just too easy.
It's accurate.
Yes. So Garrett says the TLDR of my question is, and too long don't read for those that don't know what that acronym is there any documentation or what's the bro science on crank length with road cycling? Chad's going to go deep onto this one. But I'm going to read his scenario first. Is that okay, Chad?
Yep.
Cool. He says, I'm 6'5" and a fitter recommended I should run 172.5 millimeter crank length. I've been running it for 10,000 miles over 2 years. And then I got a new bike with 175 millimeter crank length because I'm 6'5", and lots of people much smaller than me are running 175 millimeter crank length. And now I'm experiencing a ton of pain in my hip flexors, quads, hamstrings, and knees. I'm listening to the podcast like it's my job, and I love what you guys are doing. I've learned so much more over the last few weeks listening in comparison to what I was getting from a coach over a 6-month period. I'm trying to figure out how to make the cutover from Training Peaks to TrainerRoad now, so expect a new customer shortly. Good to hear, Garrett. Secondly, something he mentioned there, if you use Spotify to listen to the podcast, go on Instagram and share your year in review that shows how much you've listened to the TrainerRoad podcast. I had one person who is actually in the YouTube chat right now, which you can join us live on YouTube for that, who said that they listened to us for 30 hours on a drive, which is amazing. So cool. Bless you for that. And we've had tons of people I saw another one that said something like you've listened to 65 days worth or something of crazy. So check it out. It's cool. Spotify will wrap that up for you and tag us in it. Also on Instagram, you can go in there. If you type in TrainerRoad, Get Faster, VO2, a bunch of other things, you can use stickers that are like Get Faster TrainerRoad ones.
Forgot about those.
So go check them out and go use them. Okay. So with all that said, crank length. And I want to point out one thing before you get into this, Chad. Chad's prepping himself over there.
I got 20 minutes to get through this. Come on.
We can do it. One thing that we need to mention with this though, is the fact that many times we see a mechanical change in our setup or something like that, and then we experience some level of discomfort. And at the risk of misattribution, we just assign whatever that change is to the discomfort, right? So I've done this plenty of times where I've been like, that my cleat moved and now my life is over. Like everything is dead, but it's likely from other things as well. So what I'm saying here, and I just want to get into this in this specific situation for Garrett coming in. Garrett, I know that you're experiencing a ton of pain in your hip flexors, quads, hamstrings, and knees, and that could totally be from your crank length, but it also could be from many other things as well. So with that said, I think that we should jump in. That probably sets the tone for this conversation about crank length. But Chad, you start in wherever you feel like we should start in on this.
Okay. So I'm going to restate Garrett's TLDR. Is there any documentation or what's the bro science on crank length with road cycling? Okay. So I'm going to start with as close as I can get to bro science. And it's basically an explanation of my explanation of why I think we've come to believe that longer cranks translate to more power. I think it stems from the extremes of crank length specificity, and it's caused us to form these misguided understandings, in quotes, that longer cranks translate to greater leverage. Not much is true. Automatically translates to greater power. That may or may not be true. Probably not. So 2 examples of why we may think this, I think, are BMXers, who, when you consider a BMXer launching out of the start gates, we're talking 5 to 6 seconds, upwards of 200 RPM. Some of them touch 220, even a little higher than that, and generate 2,000 plus watts over that short span of time, as high as 2,400 watts, maybe even a little higher than that. So when you're pushing the upper bounds of what you can do in terms of your cadence, every extra millimeter on a fixed gear of crank length matters. This is true. This holds up. Tracks kind of the same way. Track sprints face similar fixed gear limitations, and longer cranks in some cases are actually beneficial. Think of the match sprint or the team sprint or chariot races, if they still do those, which are basically standing start, I think 2 laps. I mean, it's a drag race. Again, those millimeters do matter, and they can't change many other things about the bike. They can choose their gearing, but that's gearing that they're married to for the course of that event. So ostensibly, this looks like longer cranks do yield bigger watts and the highest speeds. But these are fixed gear scenarios, and it doesn't even apply to all fixed gear scenarios. Bikes with gears, however, just no, the literature isn't there. So I think with crank length, that comes down to 2 primary concerns. One is that of power maximization, and the other is that of comfort. And both those things definitely lead toward performance. I mean, they definitely impact performance. And with power, I think the idea is that shorter cranks can cost me power. Longer cranks can at least create the opportunity for more power. You still got to be able to muscle those big cranks, but the opportunity's there. Not so much, at least not as far as the scientific literature goes. Let's look as far back as 1983. Inbar and colleagues used students, mind you, and they did 30-second seated efforts, and they used crank lengths in 25 millimeter increments, all the way from 125 up to 225. And they found no significant change in either peak power or maximal power over that 30 seconds between the 150s and the 200s. And they only saw a small decline of 2 to 5% when they went to the extremes, the 125s to the 225s. So when they went very short and very long, there was only a minor decrease. But again, those are extremes. 150 to 200 millimeters covers a lot of ground. Flash forward 2001, Martin and Sperdoso, they looked at a number of things, but one of them was optimal crank length to leg length ratio for maximal power production. In this case, they only went for 3 or 4 seconds, but they used trained subjects. And they looked at 120, 145, 170, 195, and 220. So a similar design in that respect. And for what it's worth, the 170 seemed to be the sweet spot. There it is again for most of the riders. Between the extremes, 120 to 220, and we're talking an 83% variance in crank length. That's enormous. There was about a 4% decline. So again, they had to go to the extremes, and even then the power decline was minimal. Also, this 170s that I mentioned accommodated the shortest and the longest legged riders to the point where the greatest sacrifice in power output they saw was less than 0.5%, less than 0.5%. And for shortest and long legged, to put that in context, we're talking the shortest was 76, longest was 92 centimeters, which translates in inches to 30 to 36. That's a pretty big difference, 30-inch inseam to 36. Mm-hmm. Then forward a little farther, Barrett and Martin. So Martin was in the previous study. This time he's the principal. 2011, 15 trained cyclists. They determined that crank length doesn't affect joint specific power, not at the hip, not at the knee, not at the ankle, once effects of pedaling rate and speed are accounted for. And this is important because we're talking about power here. Now let's take a look at efficiency. Morris and Laundrie in 1997, this is a study I see cited a lot, see they used 6 competitive cyclists. They had them ride for an hour and 45 at 65% of VO2 max. So not a hard ride, but a longish ride, enough to inspire some fatigue. And they found that changing crank length between 5 and 10 millimeters increased the oxygen consumption up to 11%. So, the takeaway here is, oh my God, it tanks your efficiency. But they limited their riders to 90 RPM only. So they would change the crank lengths, but they wouldn't allow them to change the RPM to suit. 2 weeks ago, if you harken back, we covered cadence has a measurable impact on oxygen uptake or efficiency. Had they allowed the cadence to be matched to the crank length, probably would not have seen this. We would have seen things more in line with Astrand way back in 1953, McDaniel 2002, Ferrer-Roca 2017, who all showed no effect on oxygen consumption, aka efficiency. So the take home thus far is that this idea of optimization of crank length is irrelevant to speed, power, and efficiency. So maybe you ask, what about race performance? Let's look at mountain bike riders. McDermott and Edwards, 2009, all these studies are linked, took 7 competitive female cross-country riders. They had them use 170s, 172.5, and 175. I mean, that basically covers what is issued on every bike that comes out of a factory these days, right? I don't see different crank lengths standard. The only differences in this study were time to reach super maximal power. So the 170s, and keep that number in mind because it's going to come back, over the 175s yielded 27.8% performance advantage. I think this is crazy relevant in that these quick response times are very important in certain situations, and mountain biking is one of them, where you have to deal with constant changes in terrain. If you're racing, you're responding and maybe even initiating attacks, which makes it super road applicable too, and track applicable. If we look at Bradley Wiggins and the whole of Team GB, Great Britain, in the team pursuit in, what was that, Rio, just 4 years ago, right? Or yeah, about 4 years ago, they did it on 165s. These are some lanky fellas. The women did it on 160s, and they reset the Olympic record and the world record each round until they took home gold and reset that record once more on 160s.
That's an interesting point with that. Like, I feel like with mountain biking in particular, I've noticed this, but I notice it in a different way. When I'm riding and I'm split stanced, feet are parallel, and I'm descending. And this is probably something, and this is a good point with crank length, right, Chad? In the sense that if the crank length changes, your body also does adapt. It's not like your body is a fixed mechanism stuck upon a bicycle, in the sense that, like, your body moves around things. And that's where, like, the leverage thing is always tricky to me, because it's kind of like, well, the body is going to change the way it works, and it has that ability to be able to do it. It's plastic. But I've noticed that when I go to, because I like running 170s, when I go to 175s or anything else like that, I noticed that it really I feel like a fish out of water when I'm descending with one foot in front of the other, because of that increased distance. It's a small thing, but my legs are further spread apart, and it's very strange and awkward. So there's also that aspect of it too, which is a whole lot tougher to measure in a study. But the stance and position that you have when you're descending for mountain biking in particular it can absolutely have an effect.
I didn't consider that. Yeah.
I want to mention one thing about time trialing and shorter crank length. It can change your position a bunch.
Okay,
so
if I can cut you off, I'm actually going to cover that all in depth just now.
Got it.
Okay, cool. I did see Amber.
So I thought I should read.
I see some purple and pink here. So I don't know if you guys want to, I know Nate, your comment, but okay, cool. So thus far we've covered speed, power, efficiency, and race performance, but what of aerodynamics? So shorter cranks accommodate aero positions better. Again, full stop. That's simply how it goes, because they accommodate greater hip angle. They allow you to open up the hips a little more. So if we talk about Bradley Wiggins again, I know we're talking about the extreme situation here, but in his world hour record pursuit or world hour record attempt, he initially started training with 177.5s. So he was of the whole old school long crank thought, transitioned down to 170s. In doing so, he dropped his front end 30 millimeters and accumulated 3.5% improvement in his aerodynamics. And a lot of this is attributed to Phil Burt. And there's a little YouTube clip that is linked. Phil worked for 12 years as the head physiotherapist at British Cycling. He worked for 5 years as the consulting physiotherapist for Sky or Ineos. He is a highly knowledgeable advocate for shorter cranks. And he points out several things, one of which is that a smaller radius creates a smaller hole in the air. There's an aero advantage, number one. Even a slight crank length reduction can drastically impact your thigh-torso relationship, to the point where every 2.5 millimeter drop is roughly 1.5 to 2 degrees backwards tip of your torso. Again, your hip range grows. And what happens when your hip range grows is a number of things. First, your diaphragm can drop, so your breathing capacity improves. Pretty important with an aerobic sport. You stop chewing your knees, or as Phil Burt puts it, or hitting your elbow pads or hitting your elbows themselves. Mm-hmm. He also points out that he has never, not one time, had a reason to go bigger. So if he changes anything, he goes smaller. So all of this affords us quite a lot of flexibility in crank length selection. So why don't we chase comfort? And in doing so, or as part and parcel, chase improved joint health. So Jim Martin, who's a PhD and researcher out of University of Utah, points out that if, riders between 5'8" and 5'10", sorry, I didn't translate that to centimeters, simply can't get horizontal with crank lengths of 170 to 175. And this is a pretty standard issue again. And being shorter actually compounds this, makes it even tougher. He also points out that if you're in the middle of the height bell curve, and in the United States, that's about 5'9" to 5'4", so 175 centimeters down to 163, that a 165 to 175 range will probably accommodate you. But that doesn't account for torso length and leg length peculiarities. What if you're particularly long-limbed, but your torso's short? What if you're just the opposite? You got a long torso, short limbs. On top of that, what if you have any asymmetries? These are far more easily balanced out if you go shorter. Longer simply typically compounds the issue. Saddle pain is one of these. Saddle pain due to reaching and rocking. Too long cranks, the saddle set where you want it to be. I mean, that rocking can create issues in a hurry. Struggles with quicker cadences. Sometimes you think I just can't spin quickly. Well, maybe your cranks are too long. And then Garrett, what about joint issues? So even a 5 millimeter reduction significantly decreases the necessary range of motion. And what goes along with that is the loading range. Where in that circumference are you actually driving downward? The translation is that it lessens the kinematic load. Translated further, it lessens the wear and tear. So Phil Burt likened this to box jumps. He's like, if you had to jump onto a box 100 times, are you going to jump onto a higher box or a lower box if you're trying to minimize wear and tear? Obviously, you're going to choose the lower one. And then one of these fellas had a power analogy where they're talking about power creation. He's like, if you were to load up a squat bar, how much you put a heavy bar, it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to move if you narrow your range rather than grow your range. So shorter range moves more weight. Shorter range is more powerful is the logic there. Yeah. Amber, you want to say something? Or is that
I was just going to say, yeah, early in my career, I was advised to run 175s because I'm 5'10", I'm a larger rider. And the thinking at that point was, I'm capable of producing that torque, therefore I'm capable of taking advantage of that, and that would give some kind of an advantage. And then later in my career, I ended up with a knee injury, and it was through rehabbing that knee injury that I realized I had some more asymmetry in my leg length than I thought. I think it's over a centimeter. But I ended up going back down to 172.5s, and that made a huge difference in my comfort. And then I also dropped to 170 on my TT bike, specifically because I have a big torso and like a big lung capacity and rib cage. So I was definitely having problems with hitting my knees. Like my knees just would come up and hit me, especially when I'm trying to belly breathe on the TT bike. And dropping down to 170s on the TT bike made a huge difference. And to be honest, when I would switch between bikes, so I had 172.5 on my road bike and 170 on my TT bike, I didn't really feel a difference. I'm not a Jonathan on that front, but it was really easy to adapt between the two setups for me. And I do think that decreasing the crank length was really beneficial for my comfort and specifically for my knee.
That's perfect, because it lines up with what is the take-home advice consensus here, is that both Bert and Martin advise that if you're in doubt, go 2.5, even 5 millimeters shorter. Start there.
Yeah.
And this is backed up by a study I referenced earlier, that Ferrer-Roca 2017. They agree wholeheartedly. I agree as well, with a single caveat in that this needs to be discussed with the bike fitter. And I think this is what Nate's going to talk about, because when you change your crank length, you're probably going to need to change your saddle height. Anytime you change your saddle height, you're going to affect your reach. You're probably going to need to change your fore aft. You're at least going to affect your stack height if you don't change it. All of these things affect your center of gravity, all of which influences your bike handling. So you do have to recognize that if you change one cog in this machine, the machine is going to behave a little differently. And I think if you recruit a certified expert to steer you along this course, you'll be better off.
Yeah, so everything changes. If your cranks go, so I switched from 175 to 165 in triathlon one year, and that means that I had to raise my saddle height by 10 millimeters, right? Because my leg is going 10 millimeters less down to the bottom of the crank. But because my front end did not change, my drop was bigger. But the other part that is nice is at the top of your pedal stroke, your knee is 10 millimeters lower. So therefore you are not closing off your hip angle, which for me, I get a 10% power reduction on a TT bike with 175s. If my hip angle is 2 cut off. So if you're going to do this for 165, you're going to want to think, if you want to improve your hip angle, you're going to want to raise your front end too at the same time. And you can maintain the same aerodynamic posture as your body, but open up your hip angle, thus hopefully getting more power in the same aero. Here, what Wiggins did is, I think Wiggins, he went to smaller cranks and then also kept the front end lower, lowered it, thus increasing aerodynamics. And I'm sure he was thoroughly tested about power in different positions and aerodynamics and did all the math inside of that. I think when we do triathlon, I might try just in the very beginning 170s, because 165s are hard to come by. At least they were back in the day. But 170s, you can get them, and just see how my power output is, and see if I get that same 10% drop. I can do a ramp test on my road bike, then a ramp test on the TT bike with 170s after I do a couple weeks of adaptation to it, and or adaptation to it. I don't know what the right word is. See, you don't have to be perfect at everything, people. You need to speak English. Don't worry about it. And then see what happens, because if I can put out more power, if I can put out my road power on my TT bike, I'm going to smoke you fools. Not even close.
Oh,
Sorry,
wow.
fools.
That was bold.
Fun to say. It is fun to say. Someone said I'm the protagonist and the antagonist at the same time on the podcast. Which is
true. That's funny.
But I want to be able to get, that would be, honestly though, if I could do a lot of power on the TT bike, I would have a good advantage. But as of now, I cannot. And I think, Amber, do you really know, can you do similar power on the TT bike and the road bike?
yeah, it's about the same.
Yeah, that's troubling. Chad, you can.
That's
right?
troubling.
John, you can't though. You put out less power, right?
Yeah, significantly less. But then again, my position is probably going to change a whole lot doing triathlon. Yeah. So I might be more capable, because my current one is very constrained. If you want to see my aero position, go to my Instagram.
You have a world-class CDA. I think you can, especially for comfort on an Ironman, you can kind of go up a little bit higher, probably still
more
have
flexibility than us.
Yeah. Have some wiggle room to explore with that.
Yeah.
I use 170s, and to be honest, I'd be happy using a lot shorter cranks. But to your point, Nate, they're really hard to find. Like for mountain biking, for example, it's really hard to find 165 millimeter downhill or cranks that aren't downhill cranks. Like it's more common to find really heavy duty, big downhill cranks that are shorter, but it's harder to find light cranks that are just similarly light to what you would find for a high end crank set that's going to be shorter. So, and I, with mountain biking, it's funny because we talk about pedal strikes a lot. And I know that your thought is, well, when you go from 175 to 175 millimeters really isn't that much of a difference. And I know it's not, but it's the thing is we build a very impressive amount of proprioception with our body and our bike, like the awareness of where everything is. And when you change that, initially you'll pedal strike quite a lot when you go to longer cranks, and it will feel really weird. But in addition to that, it only takes many times what you're riding. And honestly, a lot of trail builders even will build trails with the thought of, no, that looks too high. That'll hit someone's pedal, right? So like we come across all these scenarios where we're pretty close to the line anyway. So instead of arguing about 5 millimeters, isn't it just better to have more clearance? And really the other way to look at it too is a lot of the time it's less about you hitting the cranks more often. Let's say now you're going to hit them 32 times instead of 20, whatever it is. Instead, it's only about hitting your cranks once. I don't know if anybody else feels this, but once I get one pedal strike, I'm terrified of getting more pedal strikes thereafter. So then what it does is it makes me go into sections with more hesitation. I'm more eager to jump off the bike rather than stay on the bike and try to make it through. It really just erodes confidence a lot of the time. So it's a pedal strike in itself. It actually has cascading effects that can affect your riding more than just the fact that you bumped your pedal on the ground. It can really affect the psychology of the rider. So
at TrainerRoad, so the new Epic sits lower than Pivot with the live valve. So live valve like really kept me high in certain situations. And the Pivot definitely sits lower, has a lower bottom bracket. And I am still not the Epic. Sorry, I am still not used to that. At TrainerRoad, I on some kind of flatter descent, I pedaled where I shouldn't have, hit my cleat, crashed, hit my head on a rock, but the helmet hit, so that was good. And then at Shenandoah or Shannon, I forget how to say it, but that one, I hit my other pedal so hard that it blew up the bottom of it. And I couldn't get in, and then it spun around. I got on the other side. It was SPDs, but that could have been a race ender, right? By blowing up I blew up my pedal and I blew up my shoe because I think that caused me to crash also at the same time. So pedal strikes are real, and pedal strike crashes are horrible because it's just like somebody grabbing your bike and like throwing you. It's like high siding.
Ain't no crash like a pedal strike crash. They're the absolute worst. It's so bad.
Well, there's some other bad ones.
Yeah, it's true. Good point, Nate. Even on road, right? Like it helps a lot to build that. Like it's amazing when you look at pictures of a really good crit racer or road racer, and you'll see them pedal through a turn. If you can ever do slow-mo or get like a high res picture of it, it's amazing. They've got like it'd be really tough to fit like a stack of you can't fit a stack of Post-it notes. We're talking a few Post-it notes underneath that in between their pedal and the ground. You really build that level of precision, and one pedal stroke in or out of a corner, Amber, can mean like everything, right? It totally changes things. So.
Oh, big time. Yeah. And even sometimes pedal striking without having it disrupt anything, it disrupts your focus so much it can really throw you off for a while.
Yeah, like when there's a rider that pedal strikes in a group and you're in a group ride or a race or anything else like that, the worst noise. It's like a cascade through the rest of the group. Everyone's like, oh.
What is it? Sassoon? How do you say that? Sassoon. I did the Sassoon crit, and I watched other people. Almost every single race, somebody crashed because it's a very like curved convex road. And I was actually going in a breakaway. I was attacking, and I hit my pedals so hard. This bang happens. My rear wheel skips.
Oh.
So it was the opposite. For me, I got an adrenaline shot, and everyone behind me goes, whoa. Let that guy.
It was like a dropping a banana in Mario Kart.
Yeah, let that guy go. We don't really. Let's give him a little bit of space. Hopefully he tires out because we don't need to be on that. But every time after that, I did not pedal on that corner ever again. But that's a small pro tip: is if you can watch a race ahead of time and see where people crash. Like if this is probably the most crashes I've seen in a race. If everybody crashes in the same section, there's a reason for that, and try to figure out what that reason is. I don't think people do that enough. They just, they don't watch the previous races. Mm-hmm. Even where attacks happen, that can help you too. Yeah.
You can see where attacks happen. You can watch people taking different lines through the corner and see which line is the fastest. Mm-hmm. It's really, really helpful. Yeah.
How the finish is, like if every race before you is always a bunch sprint, it's probably going to be a bunch sprint unless you're a totally different fitness level in your category. But if they're all breakaways or something, it's probably a breakaway course.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's even helpful. Sorry, I know that this is a bit off track, but from the crank length thing, but I think that we've done that one, sealed that one up. But even watching the races, if it's a criterium and you're there, watching the races beforehand with grains of salt handy, knowing that they're different fitness levels and everything else. But for example, a course where it's usually like, it's always a sprint, something like that. But if it's a super windy day, it might change things, right? Or maybe there's a thing where they change the pavement in a spot. Who knows? I mean, Amber's used to that with all the European races changing things unexpectedly at the last moment, I'm sure. But
yeah, the wind is an important one. You can watch how the peloton is adjusting and how people are moving across the road, and that can give you some really good clues for wind direction. Or even you can see the wind direction if you look at a flag, but you might not know where and how people are feeling it on the course. But if you watch how people move on the course, it makes it very, very clear.
It's like building and stuff, right? On these city crits of a certain spot, like the wind suddenly comes through and then everyone echelons out, and that's cool. Yeah. If you're on the right side, it's nice. Or the correct side.
Yeah. Well, thanks everybody for tuning in this week. We didn't get to the snacks question. We'll get to that at another week. And please submit the questions that you have, trainerroad.com/podcast. Submit the fun rapid fire ones that you have too. I'm sure there's plenty of them that we can solve the world's greatest problems on with like saddlebag placement and such. So, but you can submit those once again, trainerroad.com/podcast. I just want to personally thank Chad, Amber, and Nate, and all the hard work that you put into the podcast every week, and particularly Chad and Amber with the deep dives that they do. Nate and I are just here for the ride. So
I just show up sometimes. I don't agree with anything.
But thanks, Chad and Amber. You bring a lot to a lot of people, so it's pretty awesome.
Back at you. I mean, Jonathan's over here looking at like 10 different screens, by the way, and managing a lot in the background. So thanks for keeping us on track.
Nate's been watching TikTok. And thanks to producer Aaron as well. Really appreciate that. Go to trainerroad.com. If you want to help us above all, tell your friends about TrainerRoad, get them to sign up, get them to join you on group workouts. It's tons of fun. It'll help make you faster when you have good friends doing it as well. So go do that. Get some more people onto TrainerRoad, and we will talk to everybody next week. Thanks.
Bye, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.